Kosovsko predanje je neodvojivo od kosovsko-metohijske teritorije. Bez kosovskog predanja srpski narod ostaje bez svog identiteta. A bez Kosova i Metohije, kosovsko predanje, kosovski mit, kako to istorija pokazuje, može da deluje na nepredvidljive načine. Oni koji to znaju ulažu veliki trud u potkopavanje centralnog srpskog nacionalnog mita.
Mitološka priča o ugroženosti srpstva na svim prostorima bivše Jugoslavije.
Meni neko da kaže da sam izdajnik, meni, da sam ratovao za Kosovo.
Ovde nema junaka kao što je bio Murat i ozbiljnih stratega kao što je bio Murat.
Deklaracija o nezavisnosti Kosova je sasvim legalna.
Na taj način Srbija pokazuje da je okrenuta ka budućnosti, da napušta mitove prošlosti.
Hello, welcome everyone to our Zoom conference tonight on Kosovo and Metohija. We're glad that you're all here. Originally, this was going to be something we're going to do in person in San Francisco, but this way online is maybe better. We can have more speakers and we have people joining us from all over the world, I see on our list, so welcome. I am Father Safroni. I am a monk in Visoki Dečni Monastery. I am actually American, and I've been here in Kosovo for about 6 years, living amongst the Serbs and the tradition of Saint Sava, which we will learn about tonight. And so we have some wonderful speakers lined up for all of you. We're going to have Father Nenad Ilic, who is currently the Serbian Orthodox priest in Amsterdam. But he's also an author and a filmmaker. He's done some wonderful documentaries on Saint Justin of Chelier, Saint Basil, and on the Divine Liturgy. And we'll see some clips of his work during this presentation, so that'll be interesting. And then we have Dr. Miloš Kovic, who is a professor of history at the University of Belgrade, so he'll provide us with a very fascinating overview of the history of Kosovo and Metohija, who is a well-known writer in Serbia. She's won several awards. Really amazing person. And then we also have Father Ilarion, who he became a monk in Dečni Monastery back in 1996. But now he's the abbot of Draganac Monastery, which is in eastern Kosovo, for whom we are having this conference and raising money for their building fund. He's doing a lot of really important good work there with the local community. And so first off, I would like to turn over to Father Nenad Ilic, who is going to talk to us about the great importance of Kosovo, what we call the Kosovo Covenant, which is like a national narrative that's very important to the Serbian people and links us back to the time of Saint Sava and the foundations of Christianity in this region. And so I would like to give it over to Father Nenad.
Hello, God bless you all, dear friends. I must make some small introduction and everything. After that, we will see some video clips for the serial we made. But just to few themes to make, in front of you to put it. After the collapse of communism and disintegration of the Soviet Union, an ideology which had been in making for years, advocating the world without borders, free markets, and the neoliberal world order, whose primary impetus is profit, emerged onto the world stage in full force. National sovereignty, nationalism, strong nation states, and the awareness of common ethnic and religious affiliation are all seen by globalists as the greatest obstacles to the realization of their world without borders, to the free flow of people, goods, and services. Although neoliberal capitalism has tried to impress upon the world that is indeed the final stage of history, the end of history, as Francis Fukuyama proclaimed in the early 90s, recent events refute the ideological assumption of this new order. Nationalist movements of many countries no longer prepare for conflicts against one another, but rather are cooperating in the fight against the common enemy, globalism. It could be said that national identity has once again become an important issue that will go on to influence political processes in the near future. Once again, national symbols have become popular even among the general public. Common timeless values and morals which identify us as belonging to specific people group have returned to the public sphere as topics. In his own turn, Nobel laureate Elias Canetti noted that the national symbols of the individual European nations, even peoples who are inclined towards individualism, such as the English or Americans, have their own very strong communal symbols and unifying narratives. In the modern and cosmopolitan United Kingdom, the monarch is still crowned in 1,000-year-old ceremony, because this is what links them together and to their past, to their roots, as an island people emerging from the fog of history and the British Isles. And indeed, Queen Elizabeth is the last anointed Christian monarch in the world, something the British are right to be proud of course. In their own turn, Americans harken back to their own struggle for independence from monarchy, for their right to determine their own destinies and nourish their own narrative of the American dream, which tell us that anyone, no matter who they are or where they came from, has the chance to better their life and become whoever they want. The people of Israel, on the other hand, present us with the people deeply rooted in history, who meticulously guarded in traditions and culture through the 2,000 years of being dispersed throughout the world, and yet miraculously resurrected itself as a modern nation state just 70 years ago. The Jews show us the life and dynamism that comes from what some might call outdated traditions, and show us that our hopes for a better future are not in vain, that by our faithfulness to what makes us a people, we can become truly together once again. As for Serbia, we have our own symbols that make us who we are, and our own narrative that links us to the past. Even though all countries have fought battles and wars, of course, it could be said that the national symbol of Serbia is one particular battle, the Battle of Kosovo. The quest for national symbols, which consciously but more often unconsciously determines and defines the sense of belonging of the group for individual members of each nation. This brings us a topic that is of great importance to the national identity, national myths. Here we mean myth in the older sense of word, what today we might call unifying narrative or an epic event from a nation's past that comes to define it as people. We are very much talking about real events. The Kosovo myth is just as much about the actual historical event as the American Revolution or the biblical history of the people of Israel. National myths and narratives are things which, regardless of intellectual trends, remain crucial for the survival of any community. We all need a sense of belonging, and we cannot belong to an abstract humanity. For properly speaking, there is no humanity or society. There are merely concepts which represent real, living, individual people made in the image of the God. And for all of us, it's easier to sense the reality of our incarnated togetherness in a smaller group, each as our individual nation, without negating the ultimate truth that we are all one, all children of the same God. Thankfully, after a period of various forms of globalization, in both communist and capitalist iterations, the nation and its accompanying national feelings, the sense of belonging to a larger group before being included into an abstract notion of humanity as whole, are obviously no longer the subjects of intellectual contempt or disgust. In modernism's boom in the mid-20th century, we have the example of the famous Hannah Arendt, a German political theorist and philosopher of Jewish descent, who said that German anti-Semitism was at its lowest during the era of classical German nationalism. It is rather totalitarianism that culture enemy gives birth to evil. In order to explore the current attitude of Serbian people towards the central identity myth, we embarked on the filming of the documentary series called Kosovo Between Heaven and Earth. These excerpts should be seen then as illustrations of our conversation tonight. Some of them I just, for a moment, will put it. Just a moment. First one, okay.
Ja sam uvijek više voleo Indijance od kauboja, tako da možda smo mi poslednji Indijanci ili poslednji Mohikanci Evrope i sveta.
Prosto mi smo tačka gde sve prolazi, što se kaže.
Da se na nama mnogo koplje lome, da tako kažem, to je neki moj utisak.
Srbi su čuvari.
Jeste, mi smo veliki čuvari, ali mislim pravi, oni i mi.
Naš zadatak je da i dalje budemo centar sveta, što se kaže pupak sveta. Da budemo tu na sredi i to je to.
Svakako da postoji razlika između istorijskog značaja pojedinih naroda, ali sad zamislite da nisu postojali nikada Srbi.
Pa ja mislim da je zadatak da se sačuva srpstvo. Ja, po moje. Inače, ako ko ne sačuva, džabe ti je sve.
Ja verujem da ćemo da opstanemo i da ćemo imati budućnost.
Živ si do poslednjeg čoveka koji te se seća.
Oni su umrli 1389. godine na Vidovdan 28. juna i dan danas ih pamtimo i dan danas posle 700 godina pričamo o njima i oni su dalje živi.
Jer opet traži da se odrekamo naših karakteristika vekovnih i ono što nas izdvaja kao Srbe. Ako se toga odreklo, mi takvi kao mi onda nismo korisni ni Evropi ni nama.
Kada nam tako kaže odustanite od svojih mitova, tu u prevodu znači odustanite od sebe.
Kosovska tradicija, ona ima svoju mitsku komponentu, ali kosovska tradicija jeste ugaoni kamen srpskog identiteta.
Svaki narod počiva na jednoj takvoj vrsti mita. I mislim da mi taj mit moramo i da smo dužni da ga čuvamo u ovom trenutku.
Taj mit je u velikoj meri negde dekonstruisan, što od strane antropologa, što od strane onih koji su njime manipulisali. Dakle, govorimo o političkim elitama. Praktično da nije bilo političke elite ovde u poslednjih ne znam koliko godina koje nije taj mit iskoristila u jednom određenom trenutku, bez obzira kako se ideološki ta elita nazivala i identifikovala.
Do danas ne zna ko šta radi u ovoj Srbiji, ne zna se više ništa želi ova Srbija, nigde ide.
Nije uopšte čudo što je kosovski mit u ovim decenijama u nekoj vrsti povlačenja. Zapravo je čudno nešto drugo. Kako je moguće da se održao, da još uvek postoji?
Ono što nam taj mit poručuje, birajte vjeru, a ne večeru. I to i jeste problem sa ovim današnjim vremenom koji nas uči obrnuto. I svi napadi na taj mit idu iz te premise da je to pogrešan izbor.
Vi danas svedočite istinu koju osjećate kao svoju, sve i da ta istina u ovom trenutku protivreči duhu vremena.
Everything was okay. Just to say something about the series. The series was filmed throughout Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the diaspora also participated. Our research led us to conclude that the Kosovo tradition, the Kosovo covenant, or the Kosovo myth, call it, whatever we might call it, is alive and well in the Serbian people. Serbs are distinguished as being a culture of remembrance, of living memory, of maintaining a living connection with one's ancestors, which causes them problems in trying to fit into modern civilization because of that. Throughout the world, globalism seeks to blur or erase our common historical memory as unnecessary burdens and relativize the eternal and defining values in favor of ahistorical, faceless deficiency. But it's completely different with Serbs in our people. And there are just some more clips we should see, and after that, maybe something more clear what's happening.
Izabrani narod.
Pa zavisi u kom kontekstu posmatramo. Izabrani od Gospoda jesmo, ovde sad na zemlji od mnogih nacija nismo i sad smo, da kažem, po mom mišljenju u velikom problemu.
Pa sada mislim da jesmo. Kaže, posle Jevreja, po Novom Zavetu, da smo mi preuzeli tu dužnost. Mi Srbi, odnosno pravoslavci. I po načinu života i ove iskušenja koje nam se dešavaju u novoj istoriji, sve govori da je to to.
Mi često zaboravimo da biti izabran znači da trpjeti i onako očinski šamar malo jači nego što se drugima daje.
Izabrani smo da se borimo.
Pa izabrani da živimo na ovim prostorima sigurno.
Izabrani smo po tome da branimo svoje. Uvek smo napadnuti sa svih strana.
Tačno da jesmo izabrani narod po našoj veri. Jer naša vera nas toliko održava da smo tvrdoglavi, tvrđi od kamena.
Pa sad, ne znam, toliko stvari se dešava oko nas i sa nama da možemo da mislimo da je tako. Ali ako u globali gledamo na naš život i kako mi živimo i kakvi smo mi danas, možda i nismo izabrani narod. Možda sad.
Jesmo. Ja mislim da jesmo.
Pa ne. Iskreno mislim da jesmo.
Lično mislim da nismo. Jer sigurno da mnogi narodi kažu za sebe da su izabrani.
Ako se neko osjeća tako, možda se osjeća. Ako ne, opet, ne mora ni da se osjeća.
Ja mislim da jesmo.
Ja mislim da nismo.
Naravno da jesmo.
100%. Tačno da smo izabrani, jesmo. Tu nema govora. Sad što ima neki tu te to ne priznaju, to je druga stvar.
A svi za sebe kažu da su izabrani narod.
Nismo mi izabrani narod. Jevreji su izabrani narod. Mi nismo izabrani narod. Ali oni su srećom naša starija braća. Tako da se mi tu švercujemo. Ali nismo mi izabrani narod, ali mi volimo našeg Boga. I Bog zna da mi volimo. I Isus je s nama. I u tom smislu, a ovi znaju lopovi to. I oni neće nam to oprostiti.
Izabrani narod je stvar uobičajena kao pojam, kao fenomen u teoriji nacija, nacionalizma, nacionalnog identiteta. Anthony Smith, koji se smatra jednim od vodećih stručnjaka za teoriju nacije i nacionalnog identiteta, višedecenijski profesor na London School of Economics and Political Science u Londonu, kaže da postoje zavetne nacije.
On je tvrdio da najveću šansu da prežive kroz istoriju, da se održe kroz vreme, imaju one društvene grupe, etničke, nacionalne, koje su kadre da kultivišu i da zadrže, da održe mito izabranosti. Znači, o nekoj svojoj posebnosti.
Anthony Smith to pronalazi naročito kod protestanata, kod kalvinista. On to pronalazi recimo kod Cromwellovih puritanaca, on to prolazi kod nizozemskih pobunjenika protiv vlasti Španije, kod švajcarskih pobunjenika protiv katoličkih Habsburgovaca, pa i kod Amerikanaca. Puritanci američkih revolucionara. Dakle, iako oni pripadaju istoj jezičkoj zajednici kao Englezi, američki revolucionari, oni sebe vide kao naciju. Kao posebnu naciju i naciju koja je izabrana. To je, znači, ona ima određen zavetni odnos sa Bogom.
Pre bitke neposredno su se pričestili, pomolili se Bogu da posle bitke svi odu u Carstvo nebesko.
To govori kako smo bili kao narod. Znači, sve što idemo sa Bogom, čak i u bitki, pričali se pa onda sve drugo.
Na polju Kosovu susreće se dve velike vojske. Srbi pamte svoje junake kao što pamte svoje najbliže pretke.
sa njihove strane, sa turske strane, to je strane Osmanskog carstva. Na čelu je bio Murat I sa svojim sinovim Jakubom Bajazitom, a sa naše strane tu je bio Lazar Hrebeljanović.
Tu je sveti knez Lazar.
Najpoznatiji Miloš Obilić, tako, pošto se mnoge legende i mnogi diponimi na Kosovu vezuju za njegovo ime.
I imao je psa Silvana, koji su danas, nažalost, skroz izgubljeni. Psi srpskih vitezova, najstarija rasa na Balkanu.
Meni su pogotovo značajni bili, recimo, Toplica i Kosančići. Ne znam zašto, jednostavno su mi bili nekako, baš su mi intrigirali, čak možda više nego sam Obilić.
Pavle Orlović, mladi barjaktar, jer moje pleme, bratstvo, tačnije Samardžić i baštini tradiciju da smo mi potekli od potomaka Pavla Orlovića. Braće Musić.
Levčanin, Vuk Branković i Tamnovac.
I koji je taj Vuk Branković?
Imamo mnogo Vuka Brankovića.
Bio je onaj bosanski ban. Ne ban, nego Vojvoda, samo ne mogu se setim kako se zove. Zlatko Vuković. Vlatko.
A ostali, svi oni zajedno i Jugovići.
Jug Bogdana, njegove sinove.
Devet Jugovića, svi oni neki način nose neko svoje obeležje.
Negde mi je možda Damjan Jugović onako prirastao srcu na neki način.
I ostali junaci koji su dali živote
za Srbi, za Srbiju, za Kosovo.
Iako su u centru predanja bitka i junaci koji su tog davnog Vidovdana 1389. godine izašli na Kosovo polje da žrtvuju svoje živote i uđu u večnu slavu, žene takođe imaju značajnu ulogu.
Kneginja Milica je ispratila Lazara i vojsku pa i ostale u Kruševcu, čini mi se.
Svi su otišli, njena cela porodica, nije bilo lako, ali je bila, ja mislim, spremna na sve.
Znala je da njen suprug, da će njen suprug zadobiti carstvo nebesko.
Šta je ona radila u tom trenutku? Možda se molila.
Ona je strepela nad budućnošću svoje dece. Ali kad kažem svoje dece, ne mislim samo na njenu fizičku decu, nego na svu njenu duhovnu decu, dakle na svu Srbadiju.
Da sam ja na mestu kneginje Milice, ja bi sigurno ono što sam ja uradila kada je bila, ne kosovska bitka, ali kada je bila ta bitka za Orahovac 98. Kada su pucali na nas sa svih strana. Ja nisam mogla da uzmem oružje i da se branim. Svi muškarci su se organizovali, nisu imali ni oni, Bog zna, neko veliko naoružanje, ali svi su nekako stali sa strane da se brane. Prvo što sam uradila, ja sam uzela ključ od crkve, ušla sam u našu crkvu Presvete Bogorodice, zapalila sva kandila, pevala sam, ne znam, neku molitvu, verovatno sad se i ne sećam šta, znam nešto da je bilo. Znači, da sam bila i tada na mestu kneginje Milice, koja nije mogla da ide sa junacima u boj, ja bi klekla pred ikonom i molila se.
Just to conclude, due to the great moral and spiritual heights that it aims to preserve, the Kosovo tradition is also the cultural heritage of the whole world and for the whole world. And this is something which has so much to offer to the world today, which is so relevant to everyone today, and yet today such spiritual and historical values are generally considered to be superfluous relics of the past. Serbia witnesses that our past, no matter which country we are from, is important to our lives today, that our life in Christ is what makes us live as a people and grants us identity and incarnate people in the mass of humanity, mirroring the incarnate God as opposed to the unknown single God. That's maybe it wasn't too long, but because of this video clips, technical some problems. But okay, now we can see one of those who was in this documentary.
Thank you, Father Ned. Thank you. I think we've all learned a lot. I think a lot of especially those from abroad, might be wondering what are these Battle of Kosovo. So now we will give it over to Dr. Miloš Kovic, who's an expert in Serbian history, and I think he'll explain it to us all quite clearly. So, Dr. Miloš, please.
Thank you, Father Sofroni. It's a real honor for me to have opportunity to talk to you this special evening. I will say a few words about the history of an idea which is more than 600 years old. These few words will be based on an article that I published for the publishing house of the Serbian Academy of Sciences and Arts. The name of this publication is Artistic Heritage of the Serbian People in Kosovo and Metohija. So the fact is that for more than 600 years, the Serbs have been singing and telling stories about the Battle of Kosovo. So this is really unusually enduring legacy, especially if we know something about the history of the Serbs, which includes destruction of the Serbian medieval states, then wars, which were basically religious wars between Catholic Habsburg Empire and the Ottoman Empire, and Serbs lived on the borderlands as Orthodox community. Then forced migrations as well, and conversions into Islam or Catholic faith. So what is the secret of such a remarkable longevity of the Kosovo legacy? So of course, I can't provide definite answers for these very hard problems or questions, but let us therefore just map out the roots and set up the guideposts for some maybe future researchers. So as we already said in this movie made by Father Nenad, there are many schools. So firstly, let's try to put all this into broader context in order to better understand Kosovo legacy, to kind of European or even wider context. So when I say Kosovo legacy, this is also very important to say. So the essence was still the same for such a long centuries, but the name of the phenomenon was changing according to the change of historical cultural context. So we called it during the centuries Kosovo Covenant, Kosovo Cult, Kosovo Commitment, Kosovo Myth, Kosovo Legend, Vidovdan Idea, Vidovdan Cult, and Vidovdan Ethics. So, as I already said, there are many schools of thought, and many researchers worked on this broad field of research, theories of nation. What is nation? What is nationalism? What is national identity? But in my opinion, the very important is the work of already mentioned Professor Anthony Smith. He passed away just 6 years ago. I met him once at London School of Economics. He was professor there. And as I already said in Father Nenad's film, he was really one of the leading scholars in this field of ethnicity, national identity, and nationalism. He was educated in English school, so he was English, though he was of Jewish origin. I think it is not unimportant considering his work on nationalism and history of nations. So he was looking for answers, not so much on the plane of politics, economics, or I don't know, state power. Instead of that, he was looking to religion and culture. And his school of thought is called ethno-symbolism because of that. So according to him, the key factors in the emergence of nations are traditions, memories, and symbols, myths and symbols. And what is very important, they are mostly of pre-modern and even ancient origins. So he was writing about a nation, about the Jews of Old Testament as nation, for example. Or he found the nation among the Armenians in early Middle Ages. So what is also important for our topic is the fact that he agreed with the modernist Erich Hobsbawm that proto-nationalism is expression that was used for a sense of nation which existed before 18th or 19th century in pre-modern eras. So he found Anthony Smith and Erich Hobsbawm as well, another very famous historian. So they found proto-nationalism among Serbs, Russians, and English in the period of Tudor dynasty. It is interesting, so that they just took Serbs as one of the examples. And moreover, Erich Hobsbawm writes that what was the most important for the Serbs, that was the memory of the old kingdom defeated by the Turks, and the memory was preserved in songs and heroic stories. And perhaps more to the point, this is what Hobsbawm says, in the daily liturgy of the Serbian church, which had canonized most of its kings. So Anthony Smith agreed, another very important historian, Erich Hobsbawm, though he was a modernist, he was a communist, and he was also of Jewish origin. But why is Anthony Smith so important to us? I think because of his theory of sacred sources. So according to him, sacred sources represented the foundation upon which nations and the national ideologies were built in the modern period. So there were many sacred sources, but the most important among them are the myths of ancestry, election, God's election, Golden Age, Holy Land, and the glorious dead. So the myth of ancestry or sacred source of ancestry is basically the remembering of the birth of a saint or hero, adoption of a new cult or faith, as in the case of Tirida III in Armenia, Clovis I in the Frankish kingdom, or Vladimir the Great in Russia. We can add to this line Saint Sava or Cyril and Methodius among Slavs or the Serbs in the case of Saint Sava. But of special importance, however, is Smith's understanding of chosen peoples. This is what was mentioned in Father Nenad's film. According to him, there are chosen peoples, or at least peoples who believe during their history that they were chosen by the Lord himself. And they can be subdivided into covenantal nations and missionary nations. So the awareness of a special grace of God and the covenantal relation between a community and the Lord among Christian people is modeled on Old Testament examples, particularly those found in the 5 books of Moses, books of Maccabees, prophets, and psalms. So when historical sources frequently refer to, say, Moses' exodus from Egypt, or receiving the covenant at Sinai, entering the promised land, and so on, it is necessary to make a careful case-by-case distinction between the literary conventions of the time and the clues that indicate the presence or the awareness of election. Of course, we are talking now about mostly medieval text sources or early modern. So in addition, the covenant implies not only God's grace and care for the chosen people, but punishment as well, that will come upon these people if they break it. So covenantal nations, according to Anthony Smith, strive to keep the covenant and God's grace by setting themselves apart and refusing to be assimilated into other religious groups. This is particularly evident in periods of military defeats, immigration, and loss of state independence. Examples: Jews, definitely, for whom the people are bearers of the covenant. Armenians, for whom the church is the new Israel. And this is what he says, Anthony Smith, Ethiopians, whose ruling dynasty is the bearer of the covenant. We can add to this line the Serbs, but we will say something about that later on. On the other side, missionary peoples, they strive to propagate their cults and myths. Among the peoples that see themselves as instrumental in spreading God's will, Smith mentions the English, Scots, French, Russians, American colonists, and Arabs of 7th century. So there is a very special book written by Anthony Smith called The Cultural Foundations of Nations. This is where Smith classifies whole nations as hierarchical, those that find their models in ancient Middle Eastern states and especially in Imperial Rome. Secondly, covenantal nations, which model themselves on Old Testament, especially, of course, Old Testament Jews. And republican nations whose models or patterns are Greek city-states, ancient Greek city-states, republics, and republican Rome. So while hierarchical nations include the medieval monarchies of England, Russia, Sweden, and so on, republican nations emerged from the French and American revolutions. But in addition to the Jews, Armenians, and Ethiopians, since the time of the Reformation, covenantal nations have also included the English, Dutch, Swiss, American colonists, and Russians. It is important to mention that teaching of Calvin and Zwingli already included the belief in election and covenant. And I believe that especially through the teaching of Jean Calvin, it entered the culture of all those Protestant nations. And it was strengthened, especially owing to persecutions and exoduses during the religious wars of the 16th and 17th centuries. It was expanded from individuals to include communities as believers. So let's remember, for example, that especially during the Dutch revolt against the Spanish rule, or Puritan Revolution in England, contemporary sources, they testify about they believe that they were kind of New Israel Puritans, and that they saw the enemy as Pharaoh Egyptian forces. And it is also very important to mention that the identity of nations are basically sort of a palimpsest combination of different sorts of nations, hierarchical, covenantal, and republican layers, especially, for example, Greek cases and some others, including Serbian. So the third sacred source, the Golden Age, is the remembrance on some special period of history, the time of greatest glory and heroism, religious revival, and so on, the periods of moral, political, and artistic mode, which serve as models for posterity. So any break of norms, or breaking of norms, established during the Golden Age can even bring condemnation and destruction on the entire community. So the origin of this myth of sacred sources, again, pre-modern. We have, for example, the myth of the Homeric period of Homer among the ancient Greeks as the Golden Age, or Roman perception of Roman Republic during the Emperor, of course, or the Vedic tradition among the Jews. But for us, the most important sacred sources are Holy Land and Glorious Dead. So the Holy Land is the land where saints, prophets, and heroes have lived and died. So their relics and graves contribute to its hallowed status. Very often, it was the scene of the great battles, especially lost battles, the battles which were lost. And it is believed that, to have been sanctified by the blood and the graves of the heroes that fell fighting for the faith and homeland. So for centuries, for example, Holy Land, and of course it is also important to add that the source of Holy Land was inspiration for artists and even for scientists for centuries. So, for example, for Jews, it was Canaan, Promised Land. For Puritans, these were the shores of North America, New England, Promised Land, New Jerusalem or Salem, where they were trying to build their city on the hill, as they used to say. Or for Irish, Holy Land was whole island, Insula Sacra. Or for the Swiss, it was rootly a meadow on Lake Lucerne when they took their oath that they will fight Habsburgs. Or the plains where the great battles against the Habsburgs took place. But according to Anthony Smith, the glorious dead perhaps constitute the most powerful sacred source. So, glorious dead, they are those, as we already said, who gave their lives for their faith and community. And of course, for centuries, the pattern was Jesus Christ's sacrifice. And again, it has pre-modern roots. For example, it is important that writing about this kind of sacred source, Anthony Smith writes about Kosovo, about the Battle of Kosovo and Kosovo myth among the Serbs, and its importance for the making of the Serbian national identity. Then we have Battle of Thermopylae in 5th century before Christ for Greeks, for pre-modern Greeks, or destruction of Second Temple for pre-modern Jews, or defeat of Armenians in the battle against the Persians. That was the Battle of Avrair, where all soldiers and their generals died. So even in modern period, we have those tombs of unknown soldiers and celebrations every year, especially from the 2 world wars, or let's say, for example, Gallipoli, and the remembrance on the Battle of Gallipoli from 1915, which nowadays constitute the basis for Australian and New Zealand national identity. It all says that these myths, these so-called sacred sources, are not something specific only for Serbs. So if we look to this phenomenon in a broad perspective, we will find many similar cases, and we will be able to make these kind of theoretical models, which are only working theses, but which can be very useful in our research of the history of Serbian covenant, of Kosovo covenant, or Kosovo legacy. Now, it seems that already in the time of Prince Lazar, or Tsar Lazar, he was called among the Serbs of his time, there was already the myth of ancestry, which was linked to Saint Sava and Saint Simeon. Then it seems that already in his late 14th century, there was the myth of Golden Age, which was again the age of Nemanjić dynasty. So, according to sources that were produced, that emerged just after the Battle of Kosovo. So, in the 30 years after the battle, until 1420, many texts were produced, basically in monasteries. Only 10 of them survived, but research of those sources of those texts is very important, because very frequently writers, mainly the monks from Ravanica monastery, they state that Lazar and his soldiers were guarded and armed with the prayers of our blessed, they say, our blessed and God-bearing fathers, Simeon and the holy man Sava. So of course they mention St. George and other holy warriors of Christian faith, but they especially keep mentioning Saint Sava, Saint Simeon as a help. So when we talk about ancestry and about importance of Saint Sava, we found many sources produced in the time of Saint Sava. For example, the biography on Saint Sava, written by Domitian, his spiritual son, his pupil, we can easily say that. So he calls Serbian people God elected, New Israel, and the second Israel. He even compares Saint Sava with Moses. So it seems, it seems that what Prince Lazar has done in Kosovo Battle of Kosovo, it was reaffirmation and fulfillment of the covenant of Saint Sava, and also the most important one, the new covenant, testament of Jesus Christ, because again, contemporary historical sources from the period of Saint Sava, they say that Saint Sava, since he left palace and he chose a monastery, he chose kingdom of heaven instead of earthly kingdom. For example, in the Charter of Dechani and some others. Moreover, there is another important fact. In the period of, from the period of Prince Lazar. So the covenantal, in my opinion, the covenantal character of the Kosovo legacy is also evident in the fact that the explanation for the Kosovo defeat and the fall under Turkish rule were sought in the transgressions of the Serbs in their breaking of the covenant. So from 14th century, right until the end of 18th century, the most prominent Serbian men of letters wrote about the sins of Emperor Dušan, such as the murder of his own father, King Stefan Dechansky, his elevation of the Serbian archbishop to the level of patriarch. Namely, the ecumenical patriarch had excommunicated the Serbian, not only Serbian emperor and Serbian church, but whole Serbian people from the Orthodox community, and who made a reconciliation between Serbian church, Serbian patriarch, and ecumenical patriarch. That was Prince Lazar. This is historical fact. But nevertheless, it was still believed that because of Dušan's sins, his son Emperor Uroš Nemanjić and the Serbian people had to pay the price. So the tyranny of Mnjavčević family and the legendary murder of Emperor Uroš were seen both as divine punishment and continuation of Serbian transgression. So Dušan's sins would remain the fundamental cause of the fall of the Serbian Empire, even in the works of most important writers of 17th, 18th century, Count Đorđe Branković or Igumen Jovan Rajić. And the treason of Vuk Branković in the Kosovo battle is just the part of the series of unfortunate events, which especially include the discord and quarrels among the nobility and the treason of Vuk Branković in the Battle of Kosovo. So basically, in my opinion, and we can find a lot of sources about that, from 14th century until Njegoš's work in 19th century, one of the most famous writers of Serbian Romanticism, he was metropolitan as well, that Serbs had to suffer because of the sins of their fathers. Grehova otaca naših rati. Which takes us very close to the breaking of the covenant, according to the Old Testament theory of Anthony Smith. So, from the period of Kosovo battle, especially in these 10 texts which were produced in these 30 years after the Kosovo battle, in late 14th and early 15th century, there were many examples of specific Serbian patriotism of 14th century, especially in Žitije Svetog kneza Lazara, hagiography of the Holy Prince Lazar, written by one Ravanica monk, and especially in the biography of Prince Lazar, written by Patriarch Danilo III, just a few years after the battle. what is very interesting, it is the fact that this covenant idea was not limited to the highest ranks of society, to the nobility. And it is evident especially from the Serbs' epic songs, which were sung in the next few centuries. Some researchers think that the oldest among them were composed, made in the 16th century in Srem, in the palaces of last members of Branković dynasty. And there are some of among you, I'm sure about that, who know the song which is called The Fall of the Serbian Empire, Propast Carstva Srpskog. It is sometimes called Tsar Lazar chooses Kingdom of Heaven. So it was sang by a blind woman from village Grugurevci in Srem to the hegumen of monastery of Šišatovac, Lukian Mušicki. He wrote down this song, and this song is amazingly similar, for example, to the biography of Prince Lazar written by Daniel III, especially his commitment to the kingdom of heaven, rejection of earthly kingdom, and the kingdom of heaven understood as a kingdom of kingdom of God, through Jesus Christ, and the kingdom of eternal values, such are love, justice, truth, fatherhood as well, and especially readiness to live and to die, to sacrifice himself for those values, for the kingdom of heaven. So we find all this in this epic song, as Vuk Karadžić, as he says, which was sang by the holy blind woman from Grgurec. So there were, since we mentioned Princess Milica, there were some other women from the, say, lowest layers of society who sang songs about the Kosovo legacy. So in the time of the life, so period of national history, which was spent under the foreign rule, under the rule of Muslim Ottomans and Catholic Habsburgs, was, in my opinion, the crucial one. Because in this period, modern national identity of the Serbs was shaped basically mainly by the Serbian Orthodox Church. This is what, for example, Milan Kašanin says, that the job that was made by the absolutist monarchies in France or in Spain, in Russia, in Sweden, was done by the Serbian Orthodox Church in the Serbian case. So, in my opinion, in this period, since Serbian nobility disappeared, I think that, I'm following the line of thought of Anthony Smith, that Serbian Orthodox Church reshaped Serbian identity and Kosovo legacy from a sort of still hierarchical, feudal legacy to basically covenantal legacy and identity. Like in the case, as in the case of Protestant English or Dutch, it was a period of wars, of expulsion, of migrations, of religious persecutions, pressures to convert, and especially of forced immigration. Like the Jews, the Serbs of this period from 15th to late 18th century closed their ranks in order to prevent assimilation, in order to keep the covenant. As in Armenian case, the church was the bearer of the covenant. The church headed by the Patriarchy of Peć, in present-day Metohija. And especially, I think that even the role of Nemanjić dynasty can be compared to the role that was played by the dynasties of Ethiopia as another bearer of the covenant. Not to mention the myth of ancestry, golden age, and all that which were kept during this long period. And in this, I mean, according to some historians in this period, and let's not forget that it was period of Turkish jihad in the Balkans, and that was period of reformation, in the counter-reformation in the European West. So this is period where in whole Europe the identity was linked to religion in the most closest way. And it seems that in this period, Serbian identity was connected, so strongly connected to the Serbian Orthodox Church. Though for these centuries and even in 19th, 20th century, there were Serbs who were Orthodox or Muslim faith. And the role of the Metropolitan of Sremski Karlovci in present-day Srem, but in this period it was the region of Austrian Empire, was also important for the codification of the Serbian saints. In this period, it was very clear that the basis of identity, of pre-modern or proto-national identity of the Serbs was the memory of the Serbian saints. So there was a need to keep the memory of Serbian saints, of course with universal Christian sense, and especially of keeping remains in the chivots of these Serbian saints. So the role of the 18th century Metropolitan of Sremski Karlovci was also important. So in short, every important period of 19th century Serbian culture was marked with the Kosovo covenant, with the Kosovo legacy. In the period of Serbian Romanticism, there was a major shift, which was basically made by the Serbian intellectuals, such as Dositej Obradović or Vuk Karadžić, from the community of covenant into community of language, according to the theories of nations of the period of Enlightenment and especially German and Italian theories of nations and Romanticism. And this shift was, in my opinion, very important. But thanks to Vuk Karadžić, the educated Serbian elite got to know about the Serbs. Who were the Serbs? They got to know about them thanks to Vuk Karadžić's publications of Serbian epic ballads and poems, which are mainly devoted to the Kosovo myth. What is, again, very important, it seems that the shift, romantic shift, was made additionally from Prince Lazar as the center, Tsar Lazar as the center of tradition, as a kind of Christ-like person, to hero such as Miloš Obilić. And this shift from basically Christian self-sacrificing tradition to more heroic tradition, epic tradition of Miloš Obilić as the assassin of Turkish Sultan.
Excuse me, Dr. Miloš. I'm sorry, but we are a bit short on time. If you could say a few more sentences to close your speech, and then we'll save the rest for question and answer time.
Of course. Sorry about that. So every
no, I'm sorry.
Of course. So I'm just a few sentences. So every period of Serbian cultural history, Romanticism, Realism, Modernism, was rooted in the Kosovo legacy. Even after the creation of Yugoslavia, Kosovo myth, as a Vidovdan myth, was put on the basis. It was the root of official culture. Even in the two world wars, both movements of resistance, Chetniks and even partisans, were using the heroic side of Kosovo myth. How strong the Kosovo legacy is. This is what we all saw in the 80s of 20th century, after decades of communist dictatorship, after the decades of official, even persecution of the church, especially in the early years of communist regime. We all, or older members of our community, we remember 80s, how strong this Kosovo feeling was among the people. What is important? At the same time, and I'm finishing with that, at the same time, when we had this shift from Christian basic tradition, we had Serbian Orthodox Church, which kept the tradition, which was very close to early Christian tradition, self-sacrificing Kosovo covenant, especially in the works of Nikolai Velimirovic, Justin Popovic, and other church writers of the Serbs. And this is how we came to present day, to our present day position after the attack of NATO on Serbs or to Yugoslavia. I think the problem of Kosovo is not nowadays, it's not only the problem of Serbian-Albanian relations. Now it seems that it is a problem of international community, of international relations. And we will all see what will happen with that. Thank you for your attention, and sorry for this for this too long presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Kovic. I honestly have to say that, you know, as an American in Kosovo, I always hear about this Kosovo covenant and Kosovo myth, and honestly, no one has ever explained that so clearly to me as you just did. And so personally, I'm very grateful. I really liked how you tied it together with the general historical trends and the greater picture of history. And really, it makes a lot more sense to me right now. And just, you know, as an American in Kosovo, I often would wonder, like, you know, what does this all have to do with me? And what does it have to do with me? And now you've made me see that, I mean, it has to do with this notion of calling, of divine calling, and of divine belonging. And I just have to say, honestly, like the moment that I entered Kosovo the first time 6 years ago, I just suddenly felt a sense of being at home. Like I felt call, like, you know, people go on a vacation and it's nice, and then they go home. But I came to Kosovo and I met the monks here, and I met Father Ilarion and Father Houston, and I just felt like I can't live my life and not see these people again. I can't live my life and not be somehow. This is a part of me and my story that I need to be and become. And I didn't really understand that at first. It was just almost like I just needed to come back. I needed to come back, and it was hard to do, and I didn't know why. But it was only this last year I really realized that, you know, it was God calling me to this, because you know, God works in illogical ways. So I had no logical explanation. You know, when people would ask me, well, why are you in Kosovo? I'd kind of just make something up because I didn't know. I knew I should be, but I didn't know why. But, you know, the heart transcends the mind. The heart transcends logic, and that's what's real. So that's just a little from me. I'm sorry. Now we will move on to Ivana Dimich, who is I think will be one of the top presentations here. She's a wonderful author and commentator. And just so, yes, Ivana, please.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Yes, we hear you perfectly.
Well, I will be extremely short, as I'm not the expert of any kind. I'm just a plain fiction writer, and as I write mostly short stories. Yeah.
Very recommended reading for everyone. Buy it.
Yeah. Well, for this occasion, I can offer you some of my impressions. The first time when I came to Kosovo, I'm from Belgrade, from capital of Serbia, and I came to monastery Dečani in 1992, and that was the impression that I took from that was so overwhelming that I can repeat what Father Sophronia just said. That was something for me. I came back many times after, and I made friends and with the monks all over the Kosovo, because it was they were all young in those days. The abbot Theodosie, Archbishop Theodosie, who is the archbishop for all the region, and all the monks that I just met there, they became my friends, and I used to come every year for a few days and stayed there because there was that sense of being under the roof in my own, well, nowadays I can say that Dečani is the place where my heart is at home, if I can say that in that poetical way. And that's everything that I can add to this discussion. The only thing that I will read you from my new manuscript. I'm writing a novel for 4 years now, and in 2 years it will be finished, I hope. I'm very slow in writing. But there is a little piece which is called Refugees, in which I mentioned some monasteries from Kosovo. And Father Sophronia was kind enough to translate that little piece of the manuscript in a really beautifully translated. So at the end of my speaking, I will just read to you this little part of my manuscript, which is called Refugees, and goes like that. Ancient people rooted in the depths of history are all of a sudden ripped from their earth and become refugees. Wars and destruction proliferate. One by one, age-old civilizations are erased. History is rewritten at the whims of tyrants. The whole of the earth is enslaved. Of their own free will, miserable and sick, people become the mindless followers of the prince of this world. Mankind has indeed reached the heights and the depths of both its humiliation and its shameless pride. From holy Ararat, pieces of Noah's Ark emerge, and thus we know a terrible storm is brewing. Brought to his knees, Kosovo awaits his death sentence to be carried out, and yet Visoki Dečani still gazes up at the heavens. The Peć Patriarchate sweetly humes through the centuries. Gračanica flitters above the earth in the translucence of its beauty. Zocište heals the wounded bodies and souls of those who approach it. Dedić steadfastly and resolutely continues on unmoved. Goriot suits and calms the coming storms. Draganac leaps and shouts for joy, while the holy archangels rise triumphantly from the ruins and the Virgin of Prizren blazes brilliantly like the burning bush of old. Well, that's all from me. And just look at those pictures. They are more than words.
Okay, thank you, Ivana. It was a very beautiful reflection, and
Yeah.
it's important to us to have friends like you. And I really look forward to your new book from that paragraph. It sounds amazing. Just now, we would like just briefly a bit of a surprise to have a few words from the abbot of Visoki Dechany before Father Ilarion speaks.
Good evening. Hello, everybody. Pomaže Bog. Sorry, I was not announced, but I would like to thank to Father Ilarion and Father Sophronie for giving me this opportunity just to greet you all from Visoki Dechany Monastery. We live now in very strange occasions when we look somewhat more separated due to the situation in which we all live. But on the other hand, we are all connected in prayers and very often with technology. So this was the first year that we, as far as I can remember, that we celebrated the Slava of King Stefan Dechansky, practically only the brothers who live in the monastery. So it was in Hilandar Monastery, so it was in many other places. But let's hope this will all pass and our bonds, spiritual bonds, will be stronger. Because it's really something much more and something spiritual that keeps us together. And speaking about Kosovo and Metohija, of course, I would like to thank to Professor Kovic and to Ivana for their words, for what they said. I couldn't join earlier, so that's what I heard. I think Father Nenad also prepared something good, as he always does. So I'm very glad this was organized, and I hope that this will also encourage us not only to remind ourselves of Kosovo and Metohija, but also to feel more solidarity with some monasteries, particularly Draganac Monastery, which is doing an important mission in Kosovsko Pomoravlje, where Father Ilarion, as bishop's deputy, is also responsible as archierejski namjesnik, so it's a little bit hard to translate.
Dean.
Huh?
Deanery. Namjesništvo se prevodi kao deanery. And
Okay.
so I'm a dean of this deanery of Eastern Pomoravlje.
Yes, and so he has lots of responsibilities, particularly in this time when we have some priests for whom we have to pray, particularly Father Nicola. We have to keep him in our prayers as well. And I would like only to say that really what's really gives us all the sense of belonging to Kosovo and Metohija, not just as just a piece of territory, you know. I mean, we as Christians should not be idolaters. We are not attached to something else than God. Actually, we must not be attached to anything else than God. So when we attach to certain territory, like the Holy Land is important for Christians, like, for instance, some holy places are important for Christians. It's not for these places themselves, because we like them, we like the architecture only, we like that we feel nice. It's something more. Actually, we feel the presence of God, and also we feel our mutual connection. So, and it's very hard to say which place is more important than the other. We can have different criteria, you know. We can look historically, this monastery is bigger, this one is smaller, this one is... But One interesting thought, I will finish with this, came to my mind before I took the floor, is an interesting image from the ancient Hindu wisdom about the Indra's net of jewels, where pearls actually are glass and mirror pearls reflect one another they reflect one another in every one of them. So some see this symbolic also on drops of dew on leaves, where actually every drop of water is at the same time the mirror that reflects all others. So it's so here in Kosovo and Metohija, every monastery is nothing by itself. It actually reflects all the others. So speaking about Dečani, we cannot but speak also about Dević, which will soon celebrate the feast of St. Ionikija Devički. Regrettably, sisters will be alone with the bishop who has taken an important and very heavy cross, to particularly serve those monasteries which are isolated and to help our not so many monastics go through this as easy as we can, because we live in the territory where the medical protection is very difficult, and many of the monks and particularly nuns are in old age, and it can affect them very hard. And so we have to show solidarity and understanding, and know that the days will come when we will all gather in number together and share our joy, also with physical presence. Now this will be a spiritual presence with all of them, which we feel. So actually we cannot imagine one monastery without others. We cannot imagine, as we in one Opšte Žiće, the Cenobitic way of life, an individual without relationship to others is practically a failure of existence. It's simply, we don't have the real existence in Christ particularly. Our existence is uncompleted, it's illusory, if we are not reflected in others and others reflected in us. And the medium through which we feel this is the grace of the Holy Spirit, which we particularly experience through our prayers, through our services, and the fact that we as a church exist only as a body of Christ, not as a group of individuals having one belief system which is keeping us together. No, but actually as a body of Christ, in which we are all one with Christ at the same time, but also many. As our church is, there are churches everywhere. So Father Nenad is in Amsterdam, or others are in America, Australia, Europe, here, but we are actually everywhere where we celebrate the Holy Eucharist is the Holy Church of God, and full Christ is present. So it's individual church and the whole church. So this is really what symbolizes Kosovo and Metohija, and we are trying to preserve this feeling of solidarity also with our people, because now we're living in the time when some pragmatists, let's call them that way, or opportunists are thinking of, okay, probably Serbia will be much better without Kosovo, and but no, I mean, simply Serbia and Serbian people would never be the same without Kosovo. And what that Kosovo means, it's another question. For us who live here, Kosovo is primarily our people and our holy sites. Of course, how this will all be politically reflected and resolved, it's very much above our head. And to tell the truth, no one is really asking us very much here in the church. But what we particularly always emphasize is we need to preserve the presence of our people and our holy places. Actually, in short, the presence of a living church, which is the most important what we have in Kosovo. I don't say that without living church, Kosovo would be of no importance, but it would be completely something different. Asia Minor might be historically and archaeologically important for Greeks, but if there is no living community, if there are just ruined holy places or even preserved as museums, it's not the same thing. It's something completely different. So that's why it's very important to preserve the living church. And this is a category which is very difficult to understand to many politicians. And that's why we as a church must be witnesses of that. And we must always help the politicians and remind them how much it is important that we might lose our soul if we try just individually and pragmatically try to see, okay, how can we live more prosperously? So let's hope this dialogue and this little druženje and being together is also a kind of communion which we can have, a communion in love, communion in understanding. Once again, great thanks to Father Ilarion and lots of blessing from God in their work in Draganac. Father Ilarion is a Dečani monk, still a Dečani monk, of course, we count him. He has his cell just next to Father Sophronia here in the monastery. It's temporarily empty, but it's always ready. And many other of our brothers as well, they're always with us here spiritually. So I would like to thank them, and particularly to Father Sophronia, who is a very good conferencier, and I bet he can do it in French even much better.
Yeah, I have this impulse to talk in French because of all my classes online. I feel like, when I talk online, I should speak French.
Oh yes, he's currently doing very very well with his studies and Sergius in Paris online. So we'll soon be having his master's degree finished, hopefully. So thank you, everybody, and warmest brotherly greetings from Dečani and blessings of King Stefan Dechanski, where we joined to our brotherhood yesterday evening. A new monk, Father Tadej, a new monk who was a novice 4 years ago. So keep him in your prayers and keep us all in your prayers. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you, Father Sava. Thank you for your blessings and for your encouraging words, which we all need in this difficult year of 2020. Thank you so much. And now let's turn it over to Father Ilarion, Abbot of Draganac Monastery.
Good evening, everybody. Or I'm not sure, maybe it is not still a good morning. It is still a good evening. This company that we have. Yes, I have 5 more minutes until good morning. And I couldn't imagine that this gathering would achieve such an academic level. And I'm very grateful to everybody. I'm grateful to our Bishop Theodosie, who gave a blessing for this event, to Father Nenad, and to Professor Miloš Ković, to Ivana, and especially to Father Sava, who was surprised of the evening. And I was very glad for his very important insights and his contribution to the whole theme. I wanted to talk about different things, but many things were already said by my colleagues, interlocutors who spoke before me. So I don't want to take much of your time, and maybe we could leave something for Q&A. But one idea that I want to utter, that I want to stress out, that I think it is very important for us so that we could perceive and understand Kosovo narrative, Kosovo covenant in a proper way, is the fact that our forefathers are monks from Mount Athos. It is a unique phenomena that the forefathers of one nation are monks from Mount Athos. Maybe we are the only nation. That is Saint Sava, who fled from Serbia to become a monk. And later his father, the famous duke, warrior, and the politician, founder of the dynasty of Nemanjić, he sent his knights to bring him back. But they couldn't do that. His son, Prince Rastko, was already tonsured. He became a monk, Sava, that means dawn. That was practically the dawn of our conversion as a nation. And he couldn't bring him back to Serbia, to earthly kingdom, but instead he came to join his son, who became his spiritual father, and great warrior Stefan Nemanja. He died as a poor monk, lying on the ground with a stone below his head, with the Virgin Mary's icon on his chest, because he started a new struggle. Instead of this political military struggle, he started spiritual struggle for kingdom of heaven. He entered into the realm of this ongoing struggle between good and evil. And like Professor Kovic said, that's the beginning of the Serbian version of the New Testament. Basically, this is the same New Testament written in Serbian language. And as it is written in the New Testament, the New Testament are lives of the holy people, of the saints, and the New Testament is constantly written, and it is still written. And that's the same covenant, and the same idea was repeated by Prince Lazarus, and that was recorded by our epic poetry. And this is this idea to choose kingdom of heaven. And I want to say that the kingdom of heaven is not some abstract and blur future above the clouds. The kingdom of heaven is reality of presence of the Holy Spirit, which is uniting us. The kingdom of heaven starts when we love somebody, when we create union with somebody in love and freedom. In other words, when we create church. Every holy liturgy, when we celebrate, which we celebrate, starts with the words, "Blessed is the kingdom of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit." That's the kingdom of heaven that we have chosen. And we are chosen people not because we are ethnical Serbs. That is complete misinterpretation of the whole Kosovo idea. Everyone could be chosen if he answers to this vocation that is sent by God. Everybody who is answering this vocation and the calling of God is opening the gates of the kingdom of heaven, and he's becoming the member of the chosen nation. Everybody who starts to establish personal relation with the living God incarnated is the member of the chosen nation. That's why there is no place for nationalism in a Kosovo myth, because there is no nationalism in Saint Sava. He is somebody who, in a way, renounced his land, his fatherland, to become fighter for the kingdom of heaven in Mount Athos. Many times we feel and see that people are misinterpreting this Kosovo myth, and basically they are not choosing the kingdom of heaven, but they are rather choosing the kingdom, earthly kingdom. Their main goal are political achievements, social achievements. But according to the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, we have to fight for the kingdom of heaven in the first place, and the justice of kingdom of heaven, and everything else will be added to this core thing of our interest. And that's why our holy monasteries, holy shrines, places that were sanctified by the commitment of the people, like Saint Prince Lazarus, who died at Kosovo field battle, are constant reminder of this idea that the earthly kingdom is for a while, and the heavenly kingdom is
forever.
for ages to come, is forever. So maybe I could leave floor for Q&As now, and I would thank you all for your patience, and because this gathering is already longer than we were expecting to be, but I think that all of you are enjoying as I am enjoying the lecturers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Larian, for your words, and it was really very beautiful and interesting about, you know, the gospel and its central role to the people of Serbia. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Vlada from the Bay Area Serbs, who organized this, and he'll tell you more about the work going on in Draganec Monastery. So Vlada, please.
My name is Vladimir Jakovljević, and I'm here on behalf of Bay Area Serbs tonight. Bay Area Serbs is also known by its abbreviation BAS, pronounced as BAS. And for those of you who do not know what BAS is, it is a non-governmental organization committed to promoting Serbian culture within San Francisco's Bay Area and helping individuals and institutions in Serbia by providing funds collected through various initiatives such as this one. I would like to thank you all for being here to support our great cause. The response to this event has really been absolutely phenomenal. We have had over 200 individuals reach out to us and asking us to be present here tonight. Some of who join us from Serbia, Western Europe, United States, Australia, Canada, and even India. Further, I would like to say thank you to our speakers, who are the very reason why we have so many attendees here tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here tonight and to support this great initiative. As you all know, people have in masses been fleeing Kosovo, and this is even more true when it comes to Serbs and other Christians, especially those living in small communities who have been fleeing Kosovo for various reasons, including but not limited to being afraid, lacking resources, and ultimately being cut off by the system and finding themselves packed, leaving their homes where their ancestors lived for centuries. And day by day, more and more are leaving. And as they leave, their traces and historical marks are being erased, which could ultimately lead to a point where we find no traces of Christian existence in Kosovo. So what can we do to prevent this from happening? Of course, we should continue helping our people in any way possible, from making direct material or financial donations to individuals, families, and communities, to supporting various non-governmental organizations that strive to provide help to Serbian communities. However, as you all know, material and financial support often equals to a temporary relief. Therefore, we need to focus on finding a more sustainable solution. We need a solution that will ensure that Serbian communities and Christian communities in general don't always depend on these temporary resources. And this is only achievable if we manage to turn these communities into self-sustained communities that will live off of their own hard work, dedication, and creativity. Monastery Draganec is a perfect example of how a monastery and a community can become self-sustained, which ensures their existence and ultimately ensures that they remain in Kosovo. Monastery Draganec is the only operating monastery that remains today in the southeastern Kosovo, and as such, it is the only place where not only Serbian Orthodox, but also other Christians can come to practice religion and fulfill their spiritual needs. Nearby the monastery is a village called Old Draganec, which houses a number of families who have been living there without water and electricity for decades. Due to lack of opportunities, many people living in the village are unemployed and struggle to make means on a daily basis. And this is where Monastery Draganec really plays an important role. People from the village often knock on the monastery door and ask for various kinds of help and favors, but most of the time they seek employment because these people don't lack work ethics, but these people lack opportunities. Monastery Draganec constantly strives to provide these opportunities to ensure that the local families remain fed. For example, the monastery owns an agricultural land where it employs members of the local community and therefore provides financial income to those employees who are then able to provide for their families. Another good example of the monastery's attempt to provide opportunities to the local community takes us a few years back, when the monastery actually was in excess of its wool supplies and came to a great idea to donate the wool to the community, whose members use their creativity to produce various items, including socks, sweaters, handbags, and much more. These items were then sent to various churches and monasteries across the world, including here in Bay Area, where we sold them at our local church, and all funds collected through sales were sent back to the community. Now, the house located on the monastery property, which is the very reason why we're here today, was yet another attempt by the monastery to help this community. In summer of 2018, while talking to a Bay Area Serbs member who was visiting Kosovo at the time, Father Ilarion expressed his wish and hope to remodel a house located on the monastery property to provide housing for visiting guests and therefore produce some revenue that will be used to maintain the monastery, but also to provide economic and other types of opportunities to the local community. An estimate had already been completed at the time by a local engineering company, and at $25,500, the scope of work included installing a new sewer line, implementing water and electricity, and completing plumbing and electric work within the interior of the house. In addition, and this is very, very important, implementation of water and electricity also meant an installation of a system that allows the local village community to connect their homes and receive electricity and water for the first time, which, as you can all imagine, makes their lives easier in so many different ways. Now, what is the role of Bay Area Serbs here? In December of 2018, Bay Area Serbs had organized an event that actually secured $16,600 for the project of remodeling the monastery house. And even though this was not enough to cover the entire cost of the project, the local engineering company agreed to begin and even complete the project. However, the monastery had to promise that the remaining $8,900 would be reimbursed to the company in the future. And so, while we are here tonight to listen to our great speakers as they share their valued opinions, we must not forget the main reason why we gather here tonight, and that is to help to cover the remaining cost of $8,900 for the monastery house. We would like to thank everyone who has donated so far, but we also want to urge everyone who has not donated to do so via our GoFundMe account or our PayPal account, both of which you all have already received in your emails, and which we're going to be featuring on our main screen throughout the event, just for your convenience, so you can access all the information. By contributing today, you're helping Serbs and other Christians living in southeastern Kosovo who, without the monastery, wouldn't have a place where they could go practice their religion and fulfill their spiritual needs. You are helping the local community by delivering water and lights to their homes for the very first time. You're helping and allowing for jobs and other opportunities to be created, which all provide financial means for local families who otherwise struggle to survive. Even the company that conducted the project on the house is local, which additionally ensures that the money you contribute remains within the community that desperately needs it. We mentioned the importance of temporary help, but we must stress the importance of finding a sustainable solution that would allow our institutions to retain their existence in Kosovo, and more importantly, which would allow our people to remain in Kosovo. That sustainable solution comes through creation of self-sustained monasteries and communities, which Monastery Draganac and the village Old Draganac are perfect examples of. Now, I would like to ask every one of you who is in the audience with us tonight to imagine what could happen if we applied the example of self-sustained Monastery Draganac and the village Old Draganac across the entire Kosovo. This would ensure that our monasteries continue their existence and that our people receive opportunities that would encourage them to remain in Kosovo. This would ensure that our people remain where their families have lived for centuries, but it would also encourage others to return. Take a moment and try to remember all people you know who had to flee Kosovo. I'm sure that every one of us knows at least someone, so please keep them on your mind. Ultimately, building self-sustained communities would allow for collaborations, growth, and rebuilding, all with the goal of ensuring that Kosovo remains Serbia's holy land. I would like to thank you one more time for your patience tonight. I now go back to Father Sofronie, who will, along with other guests, of course, discuss other ways in which we can all ensure that Kosovo indeed does remain Serbia's holy land. Thank you. Please enjoy the event tonight.
Thank you, Vlada, for your very good introduction to Draganac and everything going on there. So yes, let's move on to questions. Our first question is coming from Cecile, who is French, but currently in Belgium. She's a friend of both Draganac and Decimi. She lived in Kosovo for several years, so she knows the situation well. And so we're offering her the first question. So please, Cecile, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Hello, everybody.
Yeah, we hear you, Cecile. Good evening.
So greetings from Brussels for my dear friends in Kosovo. So I have a long question. I wrote it because I think it's better to do not forget any details. So in my time in Kosovo, I heard a lot of perspective of victimization from Serbs, that they are always the victim of the Albanians. But do you ever think it would be maybe much, much better and more constructive to have a more positive and pragmatic dialogue with the Albanians who share in the same country as you and who suffered also as you? So it seems like this narrative of victimization from both sides has brought you nothing. And maybe it will be more productive to everyone to change the dynamic of the dialogue and relations between the groups, the both. And for example, why don't you have in Draganac and in Decem your website translated into Albanian language? While official statements of the diocesan website not translate in Albanian language. A lot of people in Kosovo do not speak Serbian or English. And it will be very helpful to explain all the story of your church, all beautiful art, frescoes, treasures, everything which is beautiful in your culture in Albanian language for your neighbors. I think it will be better. And there is so much people who are simply and don't know, it's ignorance, it's not hostility. So I think it's necessary to educate by themselves and with material they can, available, found in their language. So this is a remark. And I think to this idea, because when I was in Kosovo one time, I spoke with a very nice teenager from Belgrade, maybe 16 years old, a very nice teenage, normal, young people, because Kosovo, it's the youngest country of all Europe for people. It's the youngest people. It's interesting to know that. Poorest and youngest. And so I talked with this young teenager from Belgrade, and on the middle of the discussion, he told me something terrible. He told me, oh yes, Albanians people, they have no culture. We get our Serbian culture and their language does not exist, etc. I was very shocked. How some, kind young boy like this can say such horrible thing and can say such stupid things, because of course everybody gets a culture, everybody, and all the nation, all countries get their own culture. Maybe you can prefer yellow color, and me, I can prefer blue color, but color are colors. So I was very shocked by this discussion, and I think it's important for the church because it was, this discussion was in a holy place, a very beautiful place, holy place of Kosovo. So this young teenage, I saw him pray very seriously in the holy place church, and after we discussed and told me so terrible things like this. So I could not understand how he can travel, inside the country to go to his favorite monastery, and he doesn't know to say Mirdita and maybe Dobadan, but Mirdita in Ship in Albanian to salute other people when he take maybe a bus. And for me, I think it was a problem. And also a lot of people in Kosovo are Serbian people of Kosovo, are born in Kosovo and live in Kosovo, and they do not speak any word of Albanian. You must know in Kosovo, it's a reality. 95% of the persons speak Albanian, and they are, citizens of this countryside also. And so I think it will be very, very good if maybe the church can, make the first step to change the dialogue between interethnic relations. I think it's very important. And even, I think, for the church, because this young boy was a very Christian, normal teenager, and I'm sure he think he's good and he's a good Christian, or he try to be a good Christian. But when you get some sentence with xenophobia, as he told me, you cannot be a good Christian. For me, well, maybe it's a mistake, you can tell me as a Hilarion, but for me, when you say the other are no culture and his language doesn't exist, you are xenophobe, and it's a sin. So I would like really, because I think for all friends and everybody, when we visit this country, we are all touched in whole heart. I'm recognized when all say Ivana. And so I think it's important for church, because for me, church, you are authority. And maybe in this fake, communication society, very ordinary, everybody on Facebook, but it's a line, ordinary. It's an ordinary life. And I think church must show to young people, future young people, most higher life, maybe more spiritual and maybe better. So yes. I want to tell you, I'm neutral. I'm French citizen. I was not personally involved by the conflict, but I think it's important for the future of this beautiful countryside, beautiful territory. I think it's important to think about young people, and maybe for adults who suffer for war. It's very difficult sometimes to be so peacefully and so utopist. But I think we must, for young people, we must think to the future with positive thinking. If you do not do that, it will be impossible. This is my message.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cecile. I think you've raised a very important issue. I think this is a very important topic that we all need to discuss. And first, Ivana actually would like to give a response to this, if we can do that.
Can I say something to Cecil? I want to share some experience that when I was in Dečani one time, there was a monk from Albania and his family, and then the whole liturgy was in Albanian by the Father Hilarion, who speaks fluently Albanian. So, and also I studied dramatic arts in Belgrade in late 70s. And I have the five colleagues of mine were Albanians from Kosovo. So I know that people, and one is director, and one was a translator of Marina Tsvetaeva poetry, and so we have, you know, there is a communication between people. In my experience, also, of course, there are some horrible prejudice, but this is not that kind of a group of people. That's all.
If I may add something to this, what Ivana said, I have to say that on our website, our web page is translated into Albanian, and the house in Stari Draganac village is closely linked to a project that we were helping during this couple of years. Actually, we helped organizing one volunteers camp in Draganac Monastery, which was multi-ethnic, international. There were young people, usually students from all around the world, from United States, from France, from Italy, from Spain, from Slovakia, Czech Republic, Turkey, as far as I remember, Italy. But most importantly, there were people from Kosovo and Metohija, from Albania. There were Albanians from Albania and from Kosovo and Metohija, and also Serbs from Serbia proper, but also from Serbs from Kosovo and Metohija. And we had such a beautiful experience with these young people, because I'm aware, I feel deeply in my heart that we have to reach out to people who have prejudices maybe regarding Serbian church and the Serbian people. And we had such wonderful experiences with these young people who are future of Kosovo society and the future of the whole region. And I have to say that for our Slava, you could hear the song in Albanian language, you know, and I think that it was very important, and I'm proud of that. And people were playing horo, or we call it kolo, a traditional dance. And one band of traditional folk music was playing, and people, young people, they were dancing together for the feast of our patron saints, holy archangels. Serbs, Albanians, internationals. And this is the image that I would like to see always. But I have to tell you, Cecile, that it is not that difficult. I have to tell you that there are so many bad narratives, so many very malignant myths and myth interpretations and xenophobia on all sides. Kosovo Albanians in Kosovo, they are striving and they are fighting against their false myths, and they have also problem and their prejudices. But I'm aware that we have our responsibility to share our culture and something that we have inherited from our predecessors with everybody. And I strongly believe if our message cannot be universal, we as Christians are missing the point. If our message is orientated and sent only to our ethnical group or our religious group, I think that we are missing the point, because our Lord Jesus Christ told us to go to the ends of the world and to teach all the nations. This is a difficult task, and this is a task that we have started to fulfill, and I think that we have already started this with our Bishop Theodosia and Father Sava, that our church is pretty constructive and open for all kinds of dialogue, but we are hoping to improve this initiative in the future even more. Thank you.
And I'd just like to add that I think, in a way, Draganac is exemplary in Kosovo of how the church can bring together Albanians and Serbs, and that they encounter each other and meet each other and see that they are people and create those important friendships and relations. And I think that it's through those organic contacts between real people that we can change Kosovo. I think that this is something that we need to do more of in Kosovo, in the church, and that we can. And I think Draganac presents an excellent example of that. So just in the interest of time, let's move on to our next question, coming from Jasmina Vujic, who I believe is a professor at University of California in Berkeley. So please, Jasmina.
Yes, thank you very much. And I would like to thank all the speakers. It was really inspiring and I enjoy listening to all talks. My question is related to awakening of our people. As you know, the same through centuries of slavery under the Turks. Right now, we are more of a kind of slaves of entire situation in the world. We see that in Montenegro, Serbs awakened, and under the leadership of the church, would something like that happen in Serbia? Is it possible? And also, I would like to thank Professor Kovic for giving a great history lecture, which I would suggest to Cecilia to listen to, because I don't want to criticize anybody, but one question might be if she speaks Arabic, having in mind French history. So for Professor Kovic, the question is how Serbian diaspora, and we have large Serbian diaspora, could help out in awakening of Serbian people and helping out our people in Kosovo, as well as in Serbia, as well as in other Serbian territories. Thank you.
Okay, who would like to take that question?
Maybe Professor Kovic.
Okay, the second question was for me. Yeah, looking to the history of the Serbs in the 19th century, it is interesting that diaspora helped once when Karađorđe and Miloš, when they liberated Serbia. There were almost no literally no people who were educated. So after Dositej Obradović and Ivan Jugović, and Ivan Jugović was a spy, Austrian spy, that is interesting, but after them, a lot of the Serbs, descendants of the Serbs who migrated from old Serbia in 1690, came back to Serbia in order to build or rebuild its institutions. So the first teachers, so the first writers of the laws were basically Serbs from diaspora. When I say diaspora, I don't think, of course, United States. I think I'm talking about the Serbs from Austrian Empire. And only after the Congress of Berlin in 1878, the generation of the Serbian intellectuals which were born in Serbia took their part in the public life and especially in the cultural life of Serbia. First poets were Đure Jakšić, Jovan Ivanović Zmaj, Lazar Kostić. They were all Prečani, Serbs from diaspora. So unfortunately, I don't feel so, knowing how big resources, and especially intellectual resources, are. We have in diaspora, in Serbian diaspora, and knowing that Serbia is doing nothing, that's my impression. Maybe I don't know enough about but judging from my own experience, Serbia does nothing about Serbian diaspora. And this evening can show what are the ways of help. So waiting for state to take its part, for example, uneducated Miloš, he was the one who invited Serbs from diaspora. But now you have quasi elites in the university, in state institutions, everywhere, who just keep their positions. And you can see them everywhere. So I work at the University of Belgrade. There are a lot of them. They don't want you to come back. Or if you don't come back, you can just take 3 months or 4 months leave of your job at Berkeley, I don't know, and to come to help. So it's really easy. And especially what is important, I think this is a Greek experience, for example, in Oxford. And I'm sure that things like that exist in American universities, but I'm more aware about the situation at English universities. There are chairs for Greek history or for Byzantine studies financed by the Greek diaspora. So let's invite foreign academics, scholars to work on Serbian history, on Serbian culture, and maybe it wouldn't be impossible to pay them by the money which can be collected, by diaspora. But my opinion is that it's not easy to organize diaspora. Just until 1 or 2 or 3 decades, we had a state which was enemy of diaspora. So communist state was the enemy. It used to kill some members of diaspora because it was communist diaspora or Chetniks and I don't know the other. So it's not easy, but I think that the most important job belongs to the state. Now we can't see that. So, and I believe that the role of diaspora, I wrote 1 or 2 articles about that topic in Politica newspapers. So I believe that in future, the role of diaspora can be the most important in our society. Because I personally know many people from diaspora. My sister lives in Canada, in Ottawa. I know a lot of people personally from diaspora, and I know how strong resources. When I'm talking about resources, I'm talking about know-how, knowing how this huge world functions. This is what we need. But in waiting for a state, we have to organize ourselves through the church, to different organizations that we can make.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Milos, for your very profound response. Now, in the interest of time, we do have to move on to our next question, which is coming from Father John Kotalik, who is actually my godson. He's of Croatian origin, but became Orthodox, and now he is an Orthodox priest in the Orthodox Church in America in Pennsylvania. So, Father John, please ask us your question.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me and having my question, and I thank especially Father Nedad and Professor Kovic for your wonderful kind of context to help understand the Kosovo myth. Of course, I was aware of it, but didn't have that knowledge, so I really appreciate that. But actually, the question I was going to ask, I'm going to lay aside. I actually would like to ask a question in particular in regards to what Father Ilarion said about nationalism and how nationalism can and should be turned towards Jesus Christ rather than be a distraction of that, because that's always been something that has troubled me. As Father Safroni says, I am actually of mixed Czech, Polish, Croatian, and Carpatho-Russian background.
But you can speak Croatian.
That's true.
I mean Serbian. You speak Serbian.
Yes. I've studied at the University of Zagreb, and I've lived in the former Yugoslavia, when I was younger. But I still have family, mainly in Gorski Kotar, in both Rijeka and Zagreb. I mean, they've moved there since. But growing up, I was imbibed on a kind of pan-nationalism, Yugoslavism, pan-Slavism in general, and seeing my family suffer during the Yugoslav wars and seeing all Serbs and Croatians and what have you suffer has always left me with a kind of sour taste towards nationalism in general. But at the same time, we know that globalism and neoliberalism are not the solution to this. We know this. This is not certainly any more Christian. It doesn't lead us to Christ. How can we, this is of course a universal question, although in particular for the Kosovo myth, this is why I'm asking it, but how can we take our national myths, whether they be Serbian or American, how can we take our national symbols and take pride and derive strength from them and allow them to empower us to do, to respond to our calling, whatever that might be as Christians, without letting it devolve into kind of a hyper nationalistic or chauvinistic nationalism. How can we live our lives as Christians and draw strength from these national symbols and national myths without letting them become distractions or misappropriations or something that keeps us from instead living the life of Christian love and mercy as we're called to live.
Thank you, Father John. Dr. Kovic, would you like to take that question?
Okay, I expected that Father Hilarion would answer. I think it was rather the question for him.
Okay, Father Hilarion, I'm sorry. I got confused.
Thank you, Professor. I think that we are all victims of this tradition of scapegoating, always to blame somebody else, and this is something that refers to the question of Cecile. We always see somebody else as a victim, and this could be a serious problem. And this crossed my mind because some thoughts of René Girard, who is saying that basically in Christ, all tragedy is resolved, all myths are resolved. That the Christianity and the crucified Christ is the end of mythology. And in the Serbian case, for instance, when you explore your nation, your tradition, your cultural values, you have to come step by step to Prince Lazarus, you have to come to Saint Sava. And when you start to explore as much as we can, because this is undefinite ocean, personality of Saint Sava, there is only Jesus Christ. Our tradition, our culture, our history, it is a kind of a box where we keep pressure things. It is the problem when we start to worship this box, because we feel that there is something important about this box. And when we open this box by our faith, we are finding Christ in it. And in the personal relation with the living God, Jesus Christ, all known myths stop to exist. And there is no myth of Kingdom of Heaven. Kingdom of Heaven is becoming the reality. And I strongly believe that every human being can resolve and unveil his past, his cultural past, and come to the deepest truth and the experience of a living God. And I think that this is something that our church is teaching us. But unfortunately, sometimes people who don't understand the liturgical life, don't understand the life of the church, would like to understand Kosovo myth. And I strongly believe that people who are not living liturgically cannot understand our history and our mythology. In particular, when we speak about Serbs, because Serbian history and Serbian tradition is closely linked with the people who were founding their lives on the profound personal relation with Jesus Christ, with the God, and on their liturgical. And they actually, for them, the most important thing was their liturgical identity.
Well,
I'm not sure if I have answered
you,
enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a very good answer. Now let's move on to our next question, which is coming from Joanne Grambush in Kirkland, Washington, from my home parish. She's an artist and a wonderful lady. So Joanne, please.
Hello. I'm unmuted now, right?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, great.
Good to see you.
I love this assembly of the saints from across the world. It's really a blessing. I was blessed by Ivana's poem. Having been in Dečani, I understood her love of all the monasteries. I was able to go to Peš and, of course, Dečani, and also
Prizren.
Prizren, yes, that too. So I understand your love of the way that those monasteries are looking to heaven. And here I am in America with the great heartbreak of the sense of deceit and the idea that we may have to live in an atmosphere of lies, and yet we're exhorted to live not by lies. And so my question, I'm moved by both the speaking of Father Ilarion and Ivana putting it so poetically and beautifully that what are we to do in America when we are in the face of lies, and yet we know the truth? And you just have to stand on the truth and be as effective as you can in communicating that truth and living in that truth in spite of the being surrounded by lies, and also that sense of our historical tradition, just like we heard of the wonderful stories of Serbia that keep the people aware that that the Serbian nation has chosen the kingdom of heaven instead of the kingdom of earth, and we're always in that that dichotomy. And so my question is just, how do we proceed to live in the truth instead of, and also to stand up to the lies that are seem to be prevailing, but as a body, I'm reminded too of the Eucharist that brings us together, because we know that is truth. So is that clear enough for Father?
Yes, thank you, Joanne. I think maybe Ivana could have a good response to this.
Really?
Well, it reminds me of the story of when you were a child and they asked you to join the Communist Party and what you did.
No,
how you stood up to the truth.
I don't know. I can't recollect what are you referring to?
When you were in school and you were a child and you were all asked to join the Communist Party and you said, I won't.
Yeah. Yeah. And the teacher said, nobody asked you. Just shut up, you. No, but what I can maybe say to Joanne is that due to this pandemic and everything and this frenzy about in which we live, I can share my experience with you, Joanne, by telling you that when I wake up in the morning, every morning I say, thank you, God, because I am up on my 2 feet. And I'm not... Yeah.
I do that too.
Yeah, and then I have a beautiful botanic garden which I see from my window, and I explain to myself every morning that is that God gives me that every day, and that gives me that present, and I gather a little impression from the day when I see somebody smiling, when I see some friends, when I can see somebody who is nice person in a supermarket, then I think that it's a prevailing of life. It's that's how I explain to myself. I'm a retired person. I live by myself. And there are many friends who are very scared from this situation. They are scared from this, and if you live in a fear, that weakens you, and you can't fight for truth. You can't fight for for a good life, and good life is in Christ. Well, that's how I explain to myself
every day.
That I'm happy
every morning. Yeah.
You know, and
I can understand that. Mm-hmm.
Well, if that's something that I can share with you as an experience, and that makes me happy. That makes me, calm and in peace. Even if I don't have much communication with other people because I live alone. This is this is a party for me this evening. But you can be happy. You can struggle for I think everyone in his little world can do something. And the something that you can do is to be happy, because it's easy to be unhappy. Everyone has the reason to be unhappy. Every day, we can be depressed by the life itself, how it develops. But I think that my struggle for my own little happiness is something that is good.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Father Lauren, would you like to add anything to that, or?
I think that Ivana put everything beautifully, and I could only just quote Elder Paisios from Mount Athos, that there are people like flies and there are people like bees. And it is a matter of our choice what we will choose to see. And if you allow me, please excuse me, but to eat. Flies are seeing some things and they eat some things that are not so pleasant. But I think that we are supposed to be the children of joy, the children of hope, the children of eternal life, and to see the flowers, beautiful flowers in this beautiful world. Like I saw one of the flowers, Father Seraphim Rose, whom I see as a modern Holy Father of our church. This is one pleasant smelling rose, one pleasant smelling flower in the United States. So United States are blessed country, like Russia is blessed country, like China is blessed country, like Serbia is blessed country. And it is only up to us if we want to see this reality of victory of life. There is Christ constantly coming ahead. He's coming to greet us constantly. Each moment he's closer to us. So it is up to us if we want to see this or not. And this is matter of our faith and matter of our choice.
Thank you, Ilarion and Ivana, and thank you, Joanne, for your question. I think it's something that really is in all of our hearts right now, and it's very relevant, so very edifying for all of us. So let's move on to our next question, which is coming from Sanja Dodic, who is a Serb in Kosovo and a friend of Draganac's monastery. So please, Sanja.
Good evening, everyone. My question is related to the recent events in Montenegro. So if you, Father Ilarion, if you can give an answer, because you are part of this one event. So the question is, what was the impact of Church and Kosovo Pledge, Kosovo Covenant, on these recent events in Montenegro?
Mm-hmm.
The impact.
Yes. I don't know if our followers, auditors, if our people who are listening to us, if they are aware of the things that took place in Montenegro, but Church took very constructive and positive role in making a democratic and civilized society, because Church advocated for fundamental rights of modern civilized society, and that was recognized by everybody, all the people of goodwill, not only people who were believers in these processions that were organized by the Church in Montenegro, took part people who didn't believe in God necessarily, but who saw in the church the genuine movement for righteousness. And I think that if church is genuine, its message is always universal. And in that sense, Kosovo message has to be universal. All the people of all nations, if we speak as Serbs about importance for Kosovo, they could say, I completely understand this, and I have my Kosovo. This is in my life, for my country. This is place where we gave ourselves, where we committed, where we made commitment and the sacrifice. And in that sense, I think that for us, Kosovo has a life-giving narrative, not destructive, mythomaniac narrative is proved to be still very alive. And the things that took place in Montenegro are proof of that. And one of the main ideas is that Kosovo is bringing to us is let's do the things that are impossible. I'm actually trying to quote Njegoš in English without success, but basically when you believe that something that is impossible is possible, you are confessing the Kosovo idea. And that's why impossible happened, and the church in the most civilized modern way took part in the political life of Montenegro without jeopardizing its identity, without entering the partisan struggle in the arena of politics.
So is it possible to have it in Kosovo also?
I think that we, this kind of a wave of changes, of fresh air in the whole region is visible, and we can feel it. And all the people there are saying that this wave is coming from Kosovo. Right now, we perceive that this wave is very high in Montenegro, and we hope that this wave will come back to all parts in the whole region. And I hope that this will have even broader impact.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonia.
Okay, thank you, Sonia, and thank you, Father Ilarion. Now we're moving on to our next question, which is coming from Christopher Lasek, who is an Orthodox Christian from Washington, D.C., and who visited us in Decany and in Draganac a few years ago. So please, Chris, ask us your question.
Thank you very much for all the speakers. So the lectures and the questions so far were very enlightening. It's also so wonderful to see my friends Father Sophrony and Father Ilarion again. So thank God, you know. So like Father Sophrony said, I greatly enjoyed my visit to Decany and Draganac in 2018. The experience is very, very eye-opening for me, and I learned a lot through visiting and seeing firsthand the situation, right? So prior to my travels, actually, really, to be honest, I did not know much about the situation in Kosovo at all. I'm afraid this lack of knowledge is actually quite common, unfortunately, among many Americans, that when I speak with others about Kosovo and the situation that I've seen firsthand. So my question is really quite short. It's what can we do really to increase the awareness of the situation in Kosovo among Americans? You know, what can somebody like me do to help everybody understand Kosovo and Metohija and the work that you're doing?
Thank you. Who would like to take that question?
Maybe you can answer, you know. So from here.
Oh, okay. Well,
because you're here in Kosovo, to a certain extent, you became Serbian without stopping to be American. So maybe you're one who can answer this question best.
You know, I think it's a hard thing to do in a way. I think it's mainly going to be based on personal contact. I think it's important for Americans to have opportunities to meet people from Kosovo, like how when I came and I talked in Washington, D.C. and New Jersey, or I know when Bishop Theodosia has visited all over America and Canada, and Ilarion has visited Canada. I think things like that are very important, that we need to take that initiative to reach out, to tell people our story. I think there's also a lot of opportunity for us to make our story available online through all the options available now through news portals, Orthodox news portals. And I think especially on the other hand too, Orthodox Christians who are already aware should make a point of sharing those things with their communities, with their parishes, with their friends, and sharing their own experience. Because I think people like you, Chris, or Joanne, who've come here and been here and seen it, you know, you have a very important voice, a very important story. As Americans who personally have been here, that you can share, and you have weight to your story. And so I think it's important that you talk about it, and maybe even if you're able to write about it, and share it as much as you can. Again, I think it goes back to communication, to relationships, and to personal experience. I think that's the best answer I can give, unfortunately. I don't know if that helps you.
It's a nice answer.
Maybe Professor Kovic has something in mind.
Yes, would you have something to add, Professor Kovic?
Yeah, I can say that we have a similar problem here in Serbia. Even here in Serbia, it's not easy to reach real information about what is going on and how the life looks like in ghettos in Metohija and in Kosovo. So, for example, me personally, with my friend, we organized NGO, which is called Pokret za odbranu Kosova i Metohije, the movement for defense of Kosovo and Metohija, and we are just ringing bells. We are trying to influence society, and we are trying to make a dialogue, because here there is a lack of dialogue about Kosovo. We don't believe our present government, authorities, so we just need to talk, the dialogue about Kosovo. What will happen in the case we leave Kosovo, or what will happen in the case that we keep Kosovo within Serbia? So we need discussion. So firstly, I would even say political influence, ringing of bells. This is what Father Sophroni just said, writing articles, finding a way to talk freely in media. I don't know. And the other is humanitarian work, which is also in present situation, it is very important. It is very important. So we in Serbia, we have a closed media as well. We have media which are under control of government, and the other which are opposition media. But their stories are more or less very similar. It's such small differences. So we need to do what we can. And this is basically what that was a part of Ivana's answer, that everyone can do something, everyone. Within our own worlds, we can do something. We can talk to people. If we are witnessing some discussion, and if we hear something which is not true, I think our duty is to say something about that. To say what you experienced in Kosovo. I was there. I visited Kosovo, and that's not true that you're talking about in more or less polite way. So I see those two ways: ringing of bells, influencing, and then
testifying.
Yeah, testifying. That's right. And then, secondly, humanitarian work, helping people, helping real people there.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for your responses and for your question. Also, that's good. How can we move forward with all this? Thank you, Chris, for that question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's move on.
If I may add one thing.
Yes.
So from
excuse
me just for a second.
Yes.
And I would add a constructive critic of a friend.
Yeah.
constructive criticism, of friendly criticism, because sometimes we need other perspective that could, I don't know, move us forward, from the blockade, and in that sense, I understand also the question of Cecile, and I feel that her question was pretty constructive. We have to ask ourselves, what can we do to make things better? And this would be very appreciated if you, for instance, as somebody who's living in the West, tell us in which sense we can improve. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very important point, definitely. Yeah. Let's move on to our next question, which is coming from Matthew Coates, who was a Peace Corps volunteer in Kosovo near Draganac. And so please, Matthew, go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you to all the speakers for this very interesting evening. I really enjoyed this. When I was volunteering in Kosovo, I had the pleasure of cooperating with some of the brothers from Draganac in organizing a after-school program for some of the Serbian youth out there. My question pertains to this choice the Serbian nation makes between the kingdom of heaven and the earth, this world. Yeah. I saw this firsthand in Kosovo, where the Serbian people were poor by earthly standards, but at the same time, some of the most devout people that I've ever encountered. Of course, choosing the kingdom of heaven over this world is always the right choice, I believe. But does this mean that the Serbian people must suffer as long as they're on this earth? So what my question is really is, does it necessarily have to be the case that a pious nation is a suffering nation? Or is there hope for Serbia to return to the golden age that it once had, while still maintaining this unique relationship with God?
Okay, thank you. That's a very, very good question. I think, who would like to take that?
I would leave floor. Okay, I can, but I was talking too much already, maybe. But
maybe Dr. Kovic?
Yeah, so choosing Kingdom of Heaven, it was a model, ideal model for all these centuries. But in reality, a lot of members of Serbian people didn't do that. So it was the case. I believe that the suffering is and sacrifice is the very important part of Kosovo Covenant. And that without, and this is simply a story about Jesus Christ. That's New Testament. And I think that without suffering, and this is what you can feel in ghettos, in Klavas, in Kosovo, in Orahovac, in Goraždevac, in Novo Brdo, Gračanica is huge ghetto. This is what you learn there. There is a very nice song written and sung by this American actor, Kosovo. And it is basically, what was his name? He was
Jonathan Jackson.
Jonathan Jackson, right. And it was basically about suffering, sacrifice. So I think it is important. I think without it, you can't feel what's going on. I mean, that it doesn't mean that you have to look for that, and you're looking for suffering. But when it comes, you have to endure. And this is why, for example, I feel safer, better, and more free in Orahovac, more than in Belgrade, looking to television channels, which are all the same. Because I feel this kind of freedom in Dečani, in Orahovac, in Novo Brdo, all those ghettos which exist in 21st century Europe. This is a real shame, in my opinion. So yes, I think the suffering is, and compared to the history of Armenians, or Jews, or early Puritans, only communities who suffer can find the hidden energies and only person, individual who knows what is the real suffering, in my opinion, can produce a real art.
Yeah, can I say something?
Yes, Ivana, go ahead.
Yeah, izvini nešto. I just want to add to Matthew that after a certain amount of years, you can actually become happy and not suffering anymore, me included. I am a very happy person. I am 60 years old, 63, you know. So it's not only suffering. Well, maybe when you're young, you just have to suffer. But when God is in your heart and you just become calm and harmonious, and then you're very happy wherever you are. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear it.
I want to tell something. You know, you're talking about the choice between kingdom of heaven and kingdom of earth. We are talking about the whole evening, of course. It's not only case to choose something, but to find balance. You know, problem is in balance. So if the kingdom of heaven is measure of everything you're doing in the kingdom of earth, it's okay. That's okay. It's some kind of prize or some kind of curse. Somebody may say that it's curse of Serbian people, but it's in root of our nation. You know, Father Leon mentioned Saint Sava and Saint Simeon, and they went out of Serbia on Mount Athos to make something like model of Serbia. You know, to make something which is everything was in Hilandar of that time. Science, medicine, diplomacy, all you need to know in Kingdom of Earth, of course. And after, but it's most important of all that the measure stays Kingdom of Heaven. That's most important. Every time in our history, when this balance was not right, if somebody said, no, there is nothing in Kingdom of Heaven, just we're living Kingdom of Earth, like in communism or something. That's something bad happens, you know. If it's contrary, some romantic, you know, stance that which we can choose Kingdom of Heaven and just don't need Kingdom of Earth, appears another kind of problems, you know. Another kind of problems. Everything is in balance, and this balance is put in our, you know, root of our national identity in first place. And just it's in Kosovo, it's Kosovo Covenant. It's some kind. We put seal on that, strong seal that nobody can break. It's something like that.
If I may add something, if you allow me.
Yes.
I would like to greet you, Matthew. It's so nice to see you, and you know,
very good to see you as well, Father.
I recall now, you know, this voluntary camps, and how you helped us together with other people, and the beautiful time that we had together. And I have to tell you something to repeat again what Professor Kovic said, that. Our path is our Lord Jesus Christ. He is, according to Saint Prophet Isaiah, suffering servant. So this is inevitable. Even he became a curse, according to Saint Apostle Paul, because it is everyone who is crucified is cursed. So these are very strong words, very radical words of Saint Apostle Paul. But in him, behind that curse, behind suffering, there is eternal life, there is a joy, there is a beauty of life. So for the people who have taken this easy yoke of Christ, this suffering is transformed. And there are all kinds of sufferings. I'm not sure even if people in Belgrade or in Seattle or elsewhere or in Pennsylvania, as far as I remember. You're from Pennsylvania.
I'm from Vermont, actually.
From?
Vermont.
From Vermont, I'm sorry. people are suffering over there in a different way that are not visible. I'm sometimes more worried about these invisible sufferings of children all around the world in the so-called organized societies. In Kosovo and Metohija, we have a privilege that everything is making us to focus on the living God, on true values. And we are grateful even for this God's punishment, sometimes for poverty, for constraint, for injustice in the terms of this world, because this is something that is bringing us back to the bosom of Abraham. This is something that is bringing us back to our God. And we have to pray for all battlefields in this world where people are suffering, like Dostoevsky was mentioning, children that are suffering all around the world. And this is something that is not visible. So suffering is always present, but sometimes we are suppressing it. We don't like to see this in our reality, and we want to embellish our reality.
Yes. I would just like to add something too, if I could. I would have to say that this paradox, really, of suffering and joy was something that really attracted me to Kosovo in a way, because here it's all just so out in the open what everything is, like what is good and bad. In more developed countries, everything is just so nice and clean and organized, and you can really almost fall into a spiritual sleep where you don't know how much you hurt inside. But in a place like Kosovo, everything is out in the open. You know what is what. And so on the one hand, I mean, it's this paradox where in my time in Kosovo, I've definitely had some extremely difficult moments and times where I was at my wit's end, as some of you know. But also I've experienced a joy and a life that I never experienced before in America. And I think that it's in the monastery, in that liturgical space that we create, in the life in the Eucharist, in the life in brotherhood, that gives a context for that suffering, or for people in the world in the life of a pious family in their parish church. And around the Eucharist, it gives a context to our suffering, it gives meaning to our suffering, such that through that, we experience a great joy and we experience life. Like that's one of the main things I've described Kosovo as, is that we are truly living. We're not dreaming, we're not drowning ourselves in materialism. We're truly living. And I think that in the world today, that is rare and rare. And I think that's one of the treasures of Kosovo, is that, we are alive.
Thank you. Yeah, I can really relate to that as someone who has come from the West and who's had the privilege of being able to live in Kosovo for 2 years. That feeling of being on a moral, what's the word? Being moral frontier of sorts. You really can feel that, I think, when you're out there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you for raising that. Let's move on to our next questioner, which is Anna Pokajac, if she is still out there. Would you like to ask your question?
Hello, thank you. I'm Anna Pokajac. I live in London. I come from Belgrade in Serbia. I've been here quite a long time, actually 20 years. And I'm very grateful for being with you here tonight. This is the first event of this kind that I've ever taken part. I've taken part in lots of Zoom events, even medical consultations. I'm a medical doctor, that's what I do for a living. So it's an interesting experience of being connected with people from all over the world through technology. And that's in the essence of what you're trying to achieve through religion, through God. And all of a sudden you're doing it through a computer in a way, which is interesting experience. Yes, I wanted to ask something about Kosovo myth. Actually, when I arrived here, that was very it was very hard starting a new life in a culture that you don't know much about, but it was very useful experience to see things yourself where you come from in completely different light. So I encountered this Kosovo myth in myself. You know, we are, because Kosovo myth and the Battle of Kosovo is a battle where we lost, and it's embedded in our identity, which, you know, if you repeat certain experience and interact with an environment in particular way through that experience, it becomes so embedded that it changes your genetic code. And if you become so embedded in this myth about failure, then, you know, you might struggle to become accomplished, be it on individual level or population level. So I would really like to ask, how do you make peace with this in a way that doesn't put you at disadvantage because you become too fixated on failure, you know, and suffering as a way of going forward? I mean, I could speak for, you know, being a doctor, being a mother of disabled child. I could tell a lot of stories about disadvantage and how you make it work for you. But I'm interested in you know, spiritual, philosophical, and historical perspective, how you make peace with this idea of failure as a part of your identity.
That's a really good question. I think I would like to hear the response too. Who would like to take the question first?
All of us probably, but
I think we should hear from everyone. Who wants to start?
Yes. Make a list. I've heard Father Nenad, his voice.
Father Nenad, go.
I will be very short, you know. I think there's something different. It's case that stubborn belief in victory. It's just stubborn believing in victory, you know. Not believing in failure, but in victory. In any case, but because if you choose Kingdom of Heaven, you will be winner sooner or later, and this is very, very important to understand what it's about in Kosovo Covenant. If you choose Christ, you choose His victory over the death, over the pain, over the evil, over the everything, sickness, whatever. And that's the strong belief that led Serbian people through history. And it's marvelous, you know, because it's an experiment, social experiment, in which there was proof after 400 years, 500 years after slavery and everything, we preserved this belief, faith in victory. That's it. And that's always possible to make victory, to come to victory with Christ, of course, with strong belief that all pains, all everything, in the end, it will be victory. And that's the strength of Serbian people. A lot of, they're not so strong now, but this is one of our deep strength, you know. Somebody said here that, well, will happen something in Serbia, but some uprising, some awakening of people and everything. But, you know, we are a little bit slow. We're a bit slow in reactions. We need to come deep somewhere on the bottom of everything to stand up and but you stand up.
Yes, thank you. Exactly. I mean, we are people of the resurrection. We acknowledge as Serbs that, yes, death is real, pain is real, but it's not the end. Then comes joy and comes life. So thank you, Father Nenad, for bringing that out. Who would like to go next? There's so much we could say about this. Maybe Ivana or Ilarion, Dr. Kovic.
This is one of the crucial issues, and the crucial questions. The point of suffering. Why do the innocent suffer in this world? What kind of the God allows people to suffer in this world? You know, this is something that was bothering the strongest spirits throughout the cultural history of the mankind. And the only answer that I can see, and if I said this many times, if I would hear the more beautiful story and more beautiful solution for this cursed question, I would follow that other solution. But I don't see most beautiful reality than the suffering God. God who became our friend, and God who fulfilled and gave a meaning to a suffering. And he gave a new meaning to a curse. So with our crucified God who became a curse, cursed stopped to exist. Everything is beautiful and embellished, but it is up to us. It is up to our choice what we want to see. If we see the beauty in our suffering brother, in our suffering patient, if we see the beauty in our close ones, despite their weaknesses, we are on the path of the resurrection. But we can resurrect only when we pass through the experience of death. And this is, I can quote Njegoš again, and basically this is the idea and the core lesson of the New Testament, that there is no resurrection without death. All people with the refined way of thinking had to pass through some kind of a suffering. Not in a concentration camp like Solzhenitsyn or Dragoslav Mihailovic or, I don't know, Dostoevsky, but there are all kinds of sufferings. You know, we are all suffering from hard words, from egoism. We are all suffering when we feel that somebody has turned his back to us. And all these experiences, we can profit of them when we have faith in Christ's resurrection. We can resurrect from all the graves of this life. And that's why in the beautiful hymns that we sing for the Feast of Resurrection, we are saying that life is shining from the grave.
Thank you, Father Larian. Does anyone else want to say something, or should we move on?
Move on.
Okay, moving on.
Maybe we can make a short break for breakfast.
Maybe later. But next we have Jonna Denker is going to ask a question.
Actually, it's my son's computer laptop.
I thought so. But what's your name?
Denker from Chicago. Snezhana Denker from Chicago.
Okay, Snezhana, thank you.
For letting me share some questions and thoughts. And first of all, I'd love to be able to just thank you for everybody for staying up this late for some. And this is a wonderful gathering that I hope it's not going to be the last one. And because being once together like this for such a noble cause, and to share our life experiences and visits to Kosovo and Metohija, which I had a privilege to do 2 years ago, and my heart just stayed there. So it's there. But nevertheless, I'm sure you will give us a notice for the next meeting, such as this, the fundraising, virtual fundraising, which I think it's excellent idea. And I would like Father Ilarion to tell us a little more about it, so that we can share it with others. And I'm sure you will share, if you decide to have this again, that you will give us enough notice so that we can advertise it here or share it with, share the information with others so they can join us. One of my questions to Father Ilarion was, how is your relationship, not just yours, but our diocese, the Serbian Church, how is our relationship with Albanian Orthodox Church in Albania? I'd like to know that. That's number one. And number two, do you have any deadline of when do you need to pay these $9,000 for the work that it's been already done in Draganac?
Thank you, Snežana, for this question. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah.
Because it is a very important topic. I have to say that I had the privilege to meet in person His Grace Archbishop Anastasios of Tirana.
Okay.
We have very close relations with our brothers and sisters from the Orthodox Church of Albania. A couple of months ago, Bishop Theodosie, Father Nemanja from the Prizren Seminary, and I visited Tirana, visited Archbishop Anastasios and his assistants, because we wanted to bring them some help after the earthquake that happened in Albania. I don't know if you have noticed, you know about that.
Right.
And that was the initial reason, but one of the most important reasons is to confirm our friendly relationship and the unity in Christ. I have to say that we have experienced beautiful things with our brethren from Albania, and I remember one event which was very touching. For one Slava of St. King Stefan of Dečani, our brothers and sisters from Albania, they didn't have lunch with all the rest of the people because they have visited some camps that they have organized. On the other side, brothers, they also didn't lunch because they were serving everybody else. And at the end of the day, two big tables were put, one table for brothers and sisters from Albania, and on the other table was for us, monks. And in the middle of us was the chandelier, beautiful chandelier, for which it is believed that it is a donation of Đerđ Kastriota, Skenderbeg, the famous Albanian of Serbian origin,
right?
Who actually is one of the most important. He is one of the most important symbols of Albania and the most important national hero of Albanians. And we started to sing. We were singing in Serbian and Church Slavonic. Albanians, they were singing in Albanian. And we were singing together in Greek. And many people cried, you know, and I remember this very vividly. And I profoundly love my brothers Albanians, and I see as a big blessing that I can speak some Albanian, because of all these prejudices that are dividing us. So when you experience a genuine love from some Albanian, in the Serbian case, especially in Kosovo, this is something of great importance. So this could be one of the answers to your question. Okay. But and this is something that I think preserved our shrines, our openness for all the people of goodwill. I don't know if people know that Bishop Theodosie, who was abbot at the time of the war, of the conflict, together with Father Sava and the rest of the brethren, we have hosted 150 Albanians at the monastery, and we were trying to keep them safe from the Serbian police and army, or at least some people that could jeopardize them. So this attitude that is coming, I think, directly from the blessing of the tomb of St. King Stefan of Dečani, saved our monastery. And that's why I think Dečani Monastery is firmly standing despite the centuries, despite all the invaders. And I hope that this beautiful grace, this kindness of Saint King Stephen of Dečani will always be with us. Because Saint King Stephen of Dečani, he was killed by Serbian knights because he was opposed to the imperial idea at his time. And he was killed because of that. And that's why the tomb of Saint King Stephen of Dečani is gathering place of all people goodwill. That's why I personally read prayers to many Muslims by his relics. Many Albanian women got children after prayer read by the relics of Saint King Stephen of Dečani.
Right.
And I think that it is worth mentioning him as a unifying symbol, like, for instance, Đerđ Kastriota, Skanderbeg,
right.
Which is closer to the Albanians, but in a deeper way, he's very close to us as well.
Right, right.
Yes.
I'm
sorry for the long answer.
No, that's perfectly fine. Just a quick question. And my observation was in Zocic, the same thing. There were many Albanians families just for those 30, 40 minutes that we stayed after service, witnessing Albanian families coming to church, requesting the prayer, or just being in a church by themselves, because of the saints are known to Albanian population as well. So it's completely, it's the same thing. A quick sub question. I don't know anything about relationship between Albanian government and Albanian Orthodox Church. What is their relationship like? Because we know that Albania was communist for decades and all that kind of stuff. But nowadays, how is it?
It is a rather complicated situation, but the Archbishop Anastasius is a very smart man. I think that he can be seen as a holy man. And he's managing very well in these very, very particular circumstances. As you know, political reality is very confusing. In Serbia proper, in Kosovo in particular, also in Albania. And there are many similarities. There is, as you know, a lot of corruption all around. And there are all kinds of problems. But despite all of that, the church, I think, can find his orientation and its place. And one of the good examples is Archbishop Anastasius, who was perceived as a Greek, as an intruder in Albania.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And he's seen as a foreigner many times, always like a spy, when you're a foreigner, you're always seen a little bit as a potential spy, people are always questioning reasons why you came here. And on the other side, he probably made Greeks not fully pleased with his mission when he said to the Constantinopolitan Patriarch that he don't want to create a Greek colony in Albania. So his successors are Albanians that are very well educated and with whom I had such a nice discussions. And I can see that we can build future together on the basically Christian foundations.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Someone should said something, I'm sorry, about the donation. There are donations, Sophronia. You should mention that.
Yes, so far during this talk even we've received a lot of donations, and so first of all we just like to thank everyone who's donated during this talk. It's a great help. So please, those who haven't, you have the link to the PayPal and the GoFundMe in the email you received with the link for the Zoom conference, and we'll send it again after this talk. But also, we would like Lorian to add.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry for interrupting because Snežana asked another question, and
yes,
I think
about
that
the
it's
deadline.
important to answer it. What's the deadline?
Yeah.
I have to tell you there is no deadline because the company that worked, they're our friends, and usually we are cooperating with the friends who are willing to wait and they have full trust in us. But despite that, we feel responsibility to pay them as soon as possible. And I have to say that this company is also a multi-ethnic company. This is a company that was established by good friends, Serbian and Albanian, and this company is still functioning very well in Kosovo and Metohija.
Thank you. Thank you for both of you. Let's move on to our next question coming from Sanja Lubardic. Please, Sanja.
Može Bog. Hello, everybody. I'm now in Belgrade, and I'm Serbian citizen, but also Canadian resident. I'm journalist, news editor, and one of the founders of our first Belgrade church radio, which is called Sloboljubve, or Letter of Love. And we do have the only one news informative radio show or any media show about Kosovo and Metohija, and it's called Kosovo Metohija Chronicles. We decided to have it a few years ago when we understood that we have both political and academic dialogues and talks, but we do not have news and pictures about real life and real people in Kosovo. And we learned a lesson from one Western activist, Arno Guyon, Frenchman, which decided to share pictures and stories about real life in Kosovo, not about myth and our feelings about Kosovo and our personal experiences, but about real persons, mostly children and elder people living in Kosovo. So we decided to be very practical and to share as much information as we can, because we understood, being consulted by many PR agencies and propaganda masters, that we are making a mistake, losing ourselves in myths and emotions and missing the point, especially in the Western kind of thinking or mindset. So I'd like, regarding that, to ask Father Ilarion about your real life in Kosovo. Are you safe? Are you hungry? Do you have electricity daily? Do you communicate with your Serbian or Albanian neighbors? Do you have K4 guards? How do you live day by day? Because Serbia was very, very, very disturbed with the picture, positively disturbed with the picture of sacks of potatoes and onions in front of your monastery door a few days ago. And we also, many of my friends bought scents from the monastery. We ordered it, and many people.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
They're great. It's 300 dinars. How much is it in dollars? I don't know. $3 or less.
Yes.
And we can contribute practically without losing ourselves in emotions and myths which nobody outside Serbia really understands. And we should learn from our friends and, to quote, enemies. So I would like to hear a bit about your real life and how can we contribute from Serbia and abroad. We have 50,000 active listeners every day. Most of them are from diaspora. Tonight is okay, but what happens after this Zoom meeting? Thank you.
Thank you, Sanja, for asking this very important question and for asking how to help us in a concrete way. I have to say that we're living as monks. We're living fine. I think that the standard of our life is better maybe than some of life of some monasteries and elsewhere. And sometimes people are lamenting over Kosovo too much. And it is problematic for me. It's problematic. It becomes even pathetic. And it can becomes pathetic. There are people who are suffering. Lots of poor people who remained in villages, who are living in difficult conditions. They're suffering. There are people who are have this. There are children, generations of children that are raised in the ghetto atmosphere. I have experienced that on one occasion when I was driving with our monastery vehicle a bunch of children, and we were singing together. We found some common ground to the songs that we know. They were singing some turbo folk at the beginning, and I knew some folk songs as well, and we found common ground and we were singing very nicely. And it was a joyful experience. And people and kids were so joyful. And when we got to the village, kids started to continued to sing. And one girl that was a little bit older than the rest of the kids, she told them, "Oh, be quiet. You know, we cannot sing here because this could, I don't know, irritate some of our neighbors." So this is something that is very painful when the kids have to keep these things in mind, when they have to prevent themselves, to censor themselves in such an early stage of their life. And this is something that is in a way heartbreaking, but despite all of that, these kids are firm. In our villages, for instance, Tanishor village, we have music school with the 500 students. Kids from the whole area of Kosovsko Pomoravlje, they are learning to play classical instruments. And we have a very good amateur drama theater in one of the villages. So people are trying, they're struggling against this sometimes gray reality with the culture, with the beauty. And one of the most important things that people need is comfort, is a smile, is a visit. So when you come and when you visit people, this is something that really means to people here in Kosovo and Metohija, and also this could, in a way, could be connected with some kind of a material kind of a help. And I'm a little bit, I feel it awkward because we are raising funds, but I deeply believe that this is not only about the money. I'm telling you, we are not obliged to pay this entrepreneur who is our friend. I mean, in front of God we are, but he is not going to sue us if we don't do that. But all these opportunities to build something up are bringing us closer. I think that after this evening we are much richer, and I deeply believe that it is not only about the money. And it is very important to spread the good news. The gospel, evangelion, to speak about Kosovo and Metohija despite all the challenges, all the sufferings, in the positive way. And I have to tell you that we are pretty safe. We are moving freely. I'm going to the city right now, not in this period, not because of the coronavirus, but usually we are going wearing the cassock without major problems. And sometimes you feel like you're the mistake in the system, like you're the error in the system, which is not pleasant. But with some kind of minor incidents that took place during these 10 years since I'm in Draganac, we didn't have any major problems. But, taking into account what happened in Kosovo and Metohija in previous periods, we have to be cautious because, unfortunately, because of the corruption, poverty, Kosovo is, according to New York Times, I have to quote, is very fertile soil for radicalism, Islamic radicalism, and also political radicalism, in particular on Albanian side. So we hope that this is not going to burst in some kind of a big incident. We are praying for that because on the other side, there are many reasonable people, beautiful people among Kosovo Albanians. And I hope that this phase of Kosovo Albanian society will prevail.
Yeah. I would just like to add two things to Larion's answer. One of which is that, you know, in helping Draganac, you're not just helping the group of monks who lives there, but the tens of thousands of Serbs who still live in the area and mostly live in pretty poor conditions in villages, in ghettos. And really, Draganac serves as their center of their community and their life, and it's a big source of consolation for them. And Father Ilarion is a man of a great big heart, and he welcomes them and opens them, and he lets the monastery serve as this place of encounter for them. And I think it gives a great consolation to the local Serbs who live there in very difficult conditions a lot of the time. And even in material terms, a lot of times when there's a building project, local Serbs are hired and given employment, and they can feel that they're earning something. And we also have the Women's Wool Collective, which it's been a bit inactive lately, but it's still going online, where women can use their skills to earn money. And also I would point out as ways to help that we do have a website in English with a functioning online store that people can pay entirely online. We ship all over the world. You can buy our incense, crosses, prayer ropes, the women's wool products. We ship it out from Skopje, it's easier, and we ship all over the world. It's in English, very easy. People can make use of that to help the monastery and also just learn more about it. And there's a direct link to the monastery PayPal if they just want to donate. So I would also put those forth as ways to help. So yes, thank you for your question, Sanya. It was very good. Next, we're moving on to Aleksandar Rudic, and then we'll have Lazar Šupić, and after that, unfortunately, due to time, we can't have more questions. Those are our last two. So Aleksandar, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Awesome. Actually, I was surprised that I'm going to get to my question. First, just want to say hi to Father Ilarion. He looks really healthy and good.
Hello, brother. Oh, it's so nice to see you after so many years. You know, I don't know how long it's been.
It's been I don't know, 10 and so, probably more than 10 years.
Oh, more than 10 years.
Was it 2000 and I don't remember, honestly. It's been a while.
Oh.
But we always think about you. So
we have to say that Alexander and I, we were going to school together. Yeah. And Alexander visited us in Dečani as well.
Yeah, so it's a kind of unusual to speak to you in English, but again, you know, I'm kind of used to that thing here. So I guess offline we can try to catch up. So actually, I was kind of patiently waiting to ask a few questions. One most important one that Snežana from Chicago actually asked, and she kind of beat me to it. I would say that tonight I'm just one of the guys here from Texas. I'm representing some, I guess, a group of Serbian and American Orthodox people that technically very often get some, you know, we go and do some collection of money and buying a goat or a tractor or whatever. So since Snežana already asked the question, there is no deadline. So there is no deadline for this, you know, whatever we are getting money for. I would, instead of just asking a question, asking you to start kind of listing things that needs to be done, I would just kind of, do you have any kind of list of what's your immediate need in a monastery? What's like a, you know, short-term, long-term things that we can anticipate and maybe, you know, work on building up the funds so we can, you know, do something a little bit more efficient. Typically, we find out about these things, you know, through different channels. Like somebody went to Dečani, we are in contact with monastery and so on, and then we go around. You know, people are good here. I mean, people need a purpose. So if if do you have any kind of imminent needs beyond this $9,000 or whatever we're gathering? How can you share that with us, and how can we find out more? That would be one question. Bear in mind, and then I mean, like everybody else, I had to just kind of put the one comment, which I was kind of debating should I say something or not. But that's the important question. It's like the most efficient question that I really want to know. I mean, and then maybe you can answer the question, and then I can, put a comment on one thing that was said tonight. Meaning, is there a list? Can you share it? Is there like what's next?
The list is quite long, pretty long. Because our monastery is under reconstruction. There are a lot of things that are supposed to be done, and we are doing them step by step. But I would like to inform you about a very important initiative of our Bishop Theodosia in the first place, and together with all of us. There is a fund for Kosovo and Metohija of Serbian Orthodox Church that is created with the blessing of the Holy Synodus of Serbian Orthodox Church, and all the funds from that account, from that project, are used to buy real estate that Serbs are selling because they are forced to out of various reasons. Because we are basically on the verge of on a very important turning point right now. Many people are leaving, and there is a tendency, and we feel that it is organized tendency that our Kosovo neighbors, Albanians, are trying to buy as much as they can of Serbian real estate. And this could jeopardize survival and staying of Serbs in general. So, for instance, if one sold house in the village can jeopardize the survival of the Serbian village in general, we try to intervene and to buy this property for the church, and we are leaving this to somebody to use it. And this is the pattern that was used also in the Ottoman period. That's why many people who thought that their property could be jeopardized by Turkish authorities, they would give it as a present to the church, but they would continue to use it. So we are practically trying to make out of Kosovo Metohija. We are trying to make of Kosovo something that is church property, because this is the most secure way to preserve our property and to help our people to survive. And as Father Sava uttered, there is no kingdom of heaven, there is no Kosovo idea without living people here. It is very important to help people to stay here, sometimes even more than all kinds of the political solutions. So I would strongly recommend to you, maybe you can call me afterwards, to inform yourself about this account in which you can give some money for these purposes.
Okay. I mean, we heard about it. But again, mostly we are, for our own reasons, we never really went and started thinking about that in that broader terms. Typically, we look at those small ones. Again, buying a goat, buying a cow, or a tractor, or something that. So it's kind of there is a drive to do something. I want to say more meaningful.
The whole concept, Alexander, the whole concept is not to give a lot, to give a little, but to give to massively organize this, to spread this idea that a lot of people give a little bit. Yeah. And we are also encouraging people from Kosovo and Metohija to take part in this, because we cannot ask somebody else to give us if we don't give something. So all our priests, monasteries, but also lay people, they're giving their their contribution.
Yeah, and actually it's a really good thing, because that should I put it, there is a very, very defined purpose to it, and that's something that's really good in a sense, right? So if there is a specific reason, purpose, buying the land or the houses, and there is a reason behind it. Well, thank you for that answer. That's pretty much all I wanted to ask, and I just wanted to put 1 or 2 comments very quickly, because I usually don't like to do that. But the first question that was posted by Cecile, I've been living outside of Serbia for a while, and I've been living around the world for a while. I did talk to many French people. I did talk to many. I live in Norway. I lived in Africa. I'm back here in Texas. I live, and typically when I did go out to Serbia, for example, her question took me aback a little bit, and I was a little bit kind of apprehensive about the way that how all that actually was asked. But then I had to remind myself, which is very common, the people who are not from Serbia, who are not from Kosovo, who don't have, the connection to the stories or to the whole deal like we are, they have completely different perspective. And I have to remind myself that all the time. And I always also ask my friends who want to know a little bit more to also have that kind of perspective. So I'm practicing myself to explain in broad terms, as neutral as possible, but what is going on, or why the attitudes among Serbs or even Albanians actually are. But I also ask my friends who are foreigners to it, through me being a good friend with them, to also have their own, try to be open and have that kind of perspective, because although it might seem easy or logical to them to have, why don't you, why don't you work on certain things to improve the relationships and so on, but then being shocked by for example, somebody from Serbia telling some stuff that the way that they're saying, whether they perceive that as a xenophobic or so on. I always ask, again, my friends to be open-minded, to understand where is this coming from and why. And also on our side, I guess we're going to have to be more pragmatic in how we're going to explain in future to anybody who is not directly tied to Kosovo, how these things. So I don't want Cecile to feel like, there is so many kind of negative connotation about what she was saying. It's just quite the opposite. I think, her point of view is I think from our side is always, well taken, but we also ask her to be open-minded, to not to be shocked by how people in Serbia sometimes react to these things, because the reasons are much deeper. And also, I just wanted to ask another question, maybe to Professor, if he's still around, or somebody, that actually just occurred to me tonight, listening about this, is we keep on talking, and when we're translating these things to English, is myth of Kosovo, myth of this, myth of that. Maybe the meaning of the word myth or myth in our people, when I went to school and so on, lost the meaning or translation. But to a lot of people in the West, when we talk about, when we say myth, it's actually something that's not really founded on the facts. It's a lot of the romantic pictures, romantic stories that might not be actually the truth. So is there any other word that we could potentially use instead of myth of Kosovo and so on? Because to me, those are all facts. I mean, it's not a myth.
I could answer that maybe.
Yeah, please.
Because actually,
I'm done with my questions.
I do a lot of translating in the diocese from Serbian to English, so I constantly deal with these kinds of questions. And so actually I translated Father Nenad's speech, and so he of course used the word myth. And I mean, one thing that I see the same problem, one thing I've come up with is just, we can say narrative, because everyone has a national narrative, and that's more founded in reality. It conveys the same basic idea, but in the Western mind, we have this word narrative. So I like to use the word national narrative, or we still can use the word myth because it does have the older sense in English too, of being an epic event in the past that forms a nation. I think that just in whatever text it is, we need to explain that that is indeed what we mean. So I think either you can take two routes, one of explanation, that this is real, and we're using the older sense. But I think you're right that we need to be very careful about talking about Kosovo myth, because to most Westerners, that sounds like bajke, kako da kažem na engleskom, bajke, ne znam.
Fairy tales. Tales.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think national narrative, foundational narrative, formational narrative are all some good options that I've come up with, at least as a translator. So thank you. In the interest of time, we do need to move on. Just real quick, Snezhana from Chicago wanted to add something under the name of John Denker, but her name is Snezhana. Are you there?
Paula, thank you so much. I'll be very brief. Just want to reflect to what Father Ilarion was saying before, and it's in regards to, it's not just about money. And I will tell you why I think, from my perspective, it's not just about money. I organized for this year, however, it didn't take place because of pandemic, but I organized the pilgrimage / humanitarian work, like labor work. What it was as an idea, it's to connect diaspora, Serbs, Americans, whoever is willing, and our Kosovo brother and sisters who are in need of any help. So what we wanted to do was to organize annual camps of people from diaspora who would be visiting Kosovo and Metohija, and physically help, not just monetarily, but physically help, and plus be connected, obviously tangibly connected with people from Kosovo and Metohija. So the plan was to, for the starter, old refectory renovation at Holy Archangel's Monastery in Prizren, where we would be staying. And then also we were going to do creating a vegetable garden for like a fruit trees planting and stuff like that at the newly renovated monastery St. Demetrius next to Gračanica, or close to Gračanica Monastery. Okay, so that was the plan. And I still invite Sanja Lubardić, especially if she can help us promote this idea, to obviously with the blessing of Father Ilarion, to also join the Draganac Monastery if we go there next May. That's a plan.
Yes.
So that's something that I would like to press upon. A tangible connection. Alexandre, this is what you were asking. What else can we do? Well, this is what we can do. To get together, to organize ourselves, to have this sacrificial love in a tangible way. We can talk philosophy, we can talk all kinds of stuff, but let's do it in person. And let's physically, tangibly help where it's most needed. It's all doable. All we need to do is to want to do it. So that.
Thank you.
So I think that's important, and we'll see you next May, God willing. But Sanja, I would love for you to help us promote this, so our people in the diaspora, they know, so that they can know about it, because that's one of our drawbacks. We're not organized, centrally organized, or however you want to say it, even though we have a blessings from all the bishops, for example, in the United States, from the West Coast, East Coast, Midwest. We have the blessings from all our bishops to do so, but we still need, to promote it in such a way so that people know that this exists. can I say just one more little thing? I know somebody who needs a vehicle so that they can visit patients in Kosovo and Metohija. Alexandra, we need a vehicle. We have a nun who is also a doctor, and she visits patients in Kosovo and Metohija, but she almost lost the whole wheel the other day, for example. So her car is very old. No funds to get the car and get rolling. She goes and visits patients every day, besides tending the monastery. She has no luxury to stop in the vehicle. You know, she's not safe if she stops and you know. Do you know what I'm saying? So this is what, these are tangible things that we need to address. So that's another thing that we can try to do together. She helps people.
I would suggest to you to establish also relations with the Bay Area Serbs as an organization, because they know, you know, the situation also in Kosovo and Metohija and your organization, but also they're also experienced to a certain extent. And maybe if you join your forces together, you know, maybe we could together achieve even more.
Absolutely, Father. And you know that San Diego Parish also contributed in buying some land by Gračanica.
Yes.
I don't know if the Bay Area, I mean, it's all West Coast, but I mean, I hope they all know each other as well.
That's a question for Bay Area Serbs, maybe.
Because I know that San Diego Parish did that. They contributed funds for the land to be purchased by Gračanica for the same reasons, I'm sure.
Yes, that's the South Coast. That's the South Coast and Georgi Popovic. So we are all connected and we all work together.
Good, excellent.
So all people who are willing to contribute, who would like to help, join us, email us. We are trying to make a movement forward. We are trying to make our traditional way of thinking, and we are trying to make some movement on Kosovo and Metohija or wherever in Serbia or wherever in the world. So,
thank you, Georgia.
Yeah, whoever is interested to help, to join us, to give us some suggestions, go ahead. We are all open-minded and we are all ready.
You'll be hearing from me.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's all from me. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you, Snežana, for bringing up those important, concrete issues.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, so now we have our last question coming from Lazar Šupić. Lazar, please.
Thank you, Father Safroni. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Great. First of all, I want to give huge thanks to the speakers, presenters, also people who ask questions, and also huge thanks to the organizers. This is great, and I think we should continue. Thank you, Snežana, for bringing these really concrete examples. I think that's very important. It's important to buy land. I could completely support, and I think that's a great idea, but also stay connected to the local people. And I think I see Draganac as our connection to the local people, to the smaller projects, which I think here people are more data-driven and project-driven. If we make a small project, we can definitely get people get together faster and be more effective. So I had a question, but basically Alexander asked Father Leon, what is the list of next 3 projects which we can support? And but we can work on that together if you want. And but now I want to also ask Professor Kovic. Again, thanks for the very nice presentation, and I think very important presentation. And I want to say thank you also for organizing a movement for defending Kosovo and Metohija. That moment gives me a hope that there is something in Serbia going on, that we are not completely lost. And my question is, what are the most challenging things for for the movement and how we can contribute to expand the movement. And actually, to get that moment, I don't like soccer friends taking the lead. Don't get me wrong, I'm big, when it comes to soccer, I'm a big supporter of what they do there. But I think we need to have something like this movement to lead our efforts to save our homeland. So, and it's important. I don't see that there is anything in English on your page. I think it would be good. And also, Sanja talked before how they have these daily reports from Kosovo or weekly reports. I think that would be good to link these reports to your website. I would like to hear more, to see more information from Kosovo on your page. But again, we are willing to support this financially. By any means you think we can help, we are ready to help. And please, if you can comment what I just said, like what are the challenges and how we can help to expand them.
Yeah, thank you. For now, in this present situation of pandemia, we just, as I said, we're just ringing the bells, and we are focusing on a work with the Serbian public opinion. This is why it's on Serbian. Of course, maybe we should translate something of it in English because of the part of diaspora which doesn't speak Serbian. But our job is to wake up Serbian public opinion. To just wake up people that something very, very bad is going on in our country with Kosovo, which is still part of our country according to us and according to majority of our country. So I think we will really have to think about gathering help from diaspora, and I think it would be, let's stay in contact through email.
Let's stay in touch. Yes.
So for now, our needs are not very big. We have some support from here and from there, and we have our web page doing something. But for more visible actions, we have to wait the change of situation, and then we are trying to follow very closely situation in Kosovo. For example, we publish regularly about the political situation in Tirana, in Pristina, and in Tirana as well. So we are trying to follow what's going on among the Albanians. And I even believe that we are the only media in Belgrade. You have Kosovo in Kosovo, you have Kosovo Online and other websites. But I believe that we are the only website that is at least trying to follow what's going on. But it doesn't mean that we have to work better and stronger. So let's stay in contact after this.
I don't know. Let's stay in contact. Just a small comment. So I think I don't know what's the original idea when you created the movement, but because there was nothing at that point. Basically, Vučić saying whatever he wants, and the media is blocked, and then nobody is saying anything after that. But I feel that's a little bit closed circle. That's my honest opinion, and I would like, if it's possible, to broaden that, because I know for the fact that many very well educated, in very good positions, Serbian people in diaspora would support your ideas and think the same way you think.
Yeah, we are thinking about making, I don't know how to translate it, povereništva. So we are just avoiding everything that looks like being a party. We are not a party. We are not directed to the taking of power in this state. So, but we are very seriously thinking about making povereništva. And maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to make some of those povereništva somewhere in diaspora, where there is interest for that. And we will certainly need the help.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you again. That's all from my side.
Okay, well, I think we have reached the end of our evening or afternoon or morning or wherever it is that you are in the world. I would first of all like to thank all of our speakers, Father Nenad Ilic, Dr. Milos Kovic, Ivana Dimich, and Father Ilarion, of course. I would like to thank the Bay Area Serbs for organizing this whole conference for us and everything they have done to help out Draganec Monastery. They are great help. I'd like to thank, of course, everyone who's donated. There's been a lot of donations, I'm told, during this talk. And again, if you haven't yet, you'll be getting an email following this with further information about how to donate, or you see on the chat on the side, there's a link. Yes, just thank you everyone for following us to the very end. And I hope we can have another event like this.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And if you don't mind, maybe we could read the prayer at the end.
Sure.
Yes, Ilari, why don't you say a prayer?
Yes. U ime Oca i Sina i Svetoga Duha, amen. Dostojno jest Jakovo istinu blažiti Tja Bogorodicu, prisno blaženu i preneporočni Mater Boga našeg, očesnejšu i herovim i slavnejšu, bez srednjenja Serafim, bez istenja Boga slova Rožu i sušću Bogorodicu Tja veličajem. By the prayers of our Holy Fathers, Lord, save us. Thank you,
Amen.
everybody.
Amen. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.